Chapter 202. He Yan was still in a daze when they boarded the carriage to leave the palace. Fei Nu was an honest person. She silently drove the carriage while the young man sat beside her. The jade pendant in her hand was originally cold to the touch. Now that she held it tightly, it seemed to be burning hot. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on her hand. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "Do you want to crush it?" He Yan's strength was trained by throwing stone weights in the martial arts field. Crushing a walnut with her bare hands was not a problem. It was not impossible for her to crush this piece of jade. She was startled and unconsciously spread her hands. She did not know what to do. This was a dual-colored jade bestowed by the Empress Dowager. One was given to Xiao Jing and the other to Xiao Ju. It was rumored that it was the family heirloom of the Xiao family. Lin Shuanghe said that this jade pendant never left Xiao Ju's side. She had once stolen it when she was drunk in the Liangzhou guards. Knowing that it was a rare item, she returned it to Xiao Ju. She did not expect that after so many twists and turns, it would still end up in her hands. He Yan had never received such a valuable gift. She hesitated and said, "Governor, this is not appropriate for me, is it?" Xiao Ju took the snake-patterned black jade from her hand. He lowered his head and removed the tassel from He Yan's waist and replaced it with this piece of black jade. His movements were gentle and his expression was careful. His tone was clear and light. Big brother gave his piece to sister-in-law. Since you and I are engaged, I should give it to you. Engagement? He Yan's face turned red again. The words that Xiao Ju had said to her in that abandoned side palace just now, she simply couldn't think about it. If she thought about it, she would feel like she had secretly seen fireworks for the first time after the New Year's Eve dinner. Boom! The fireworks flew into the sky and turned into countless dazzling stars in the sky. Even when she lay on the bed at night, she could not fall asleep. She would always remember the beauty of that moment. He Yan tried to stop herself from thinking about it. She asked, "Are we going back to Xiao Manor now?" Hearing the word, back, Xiao Ju curled his lips and said, "To your home." "My home? You're a woman." Xiao Ju lowered her eyes. "No one knew that you lived in the Xiao mansion before, but after today, someone will definitely investigate the He family. If you live in my residence, there will be gossip." He didn't care about what other people thought, but He Yan couldn't, and neither could He Sui and He Yunsheng. Nowadays, men and women were not as clear-cut as in the previous dynasty, but if word got out that she was living in another man's residence before she was married, it would not be good for He Yan. Right. He Yan nodded. When she thought about returning to the He family, she felt another headache. He Yunsheng had repeatedly urged her to immediately resign. Now, not only did she not resign, she was also promoted to nobility. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about the woman's identity being exposed. But for He Sui and He Yunsheng, it should be a big shock. Don't worry. Xiao Ju seemed to have seen through her worries and reminded her, during the celebration banquet, there were already people who went to congratulate the He family in advance. Your father and younger brother should already know. He Yan felt relieved. He Sui and He Yunsheng indeed already knew. Not long ago, He Yunsheng was still reading in his room. He Sui came back from her employer's home and took some water to take a bath. Qing Mei had just finished washing their clothes when she heard someone knocking on the door. Their street was filled with people who did small business, and they weren't rich. It was already so late, and all the houses were closed. Qing Mei was a girl, after all. He Sui took an oil lamp and went to open the door. He Yunsheng was worried that something might happen, so he also closed the door and put on an outer robe to follow his father. Who knew that when the door opened, there would be a long line of people outside? They were all dressed as palace servants. He Yunsheng's heart skipped a beat. He only thought, could it be that something happened to He Yan? Her official position of Muan Lang came easily, but it wasn't a long-term plan. Once the matter was exposed, she was afraid that she would suffer a disaster. He Sui was also confused. He Yunqing didn't tell his father that He Yan had been promoted because he was afraid that he would worry. He Sui only thought that it could be that the Fan family came to cause trouble again. He immediately asked, "Officials, this is, congratulations to old Master He, congratulations to old Master He." The head servant's face was full of joy as he ordered people to carry the box behind him into the courtyard. Old Master He raised a good daughter. Lady He is a woman who doesn't lose out to men. Previously, in the Battle of Jiang and the Battle of Rundu to defend the city, His Majesty conferred Lady He the title of Marquis Wuan and bestowed a marriage. I think that General Fengyun will soon come to visit, so I congratulate you in advance. He Yunqing sucked in a breath of cold air. This street wasn't very wide. Once night fell, people could clearly hear who was beating their children or quarreling with each other. These eunuchs' formation was too big, so the neighbors had already heard the commotion. Some hid behind their doors and peeked out through the cracks of their doors, while others simply opened their doors to watch the commotion. They didn't mind the commotion. At this moment, the eunuchs rattled on. Everyone didn't quite understand, but they were clear about one thing. The eldest daughter of the He family didn't die. Not only did she not die, but she also didn't confer an official position and was bestowed a marriage. He Sui only knew that He Yan had returned to the capital. Because of his inconvenient identity, he temporarily stayed at a friend's house. He Sui thought that He Yan had become a deserter, so he didn't dare to say anything. Now, all of these matters were so confusing that he didn't know where to start asking. However, He Yunqing was quick-witted. When he heard the eunuch say, "daughter," he knew that He Yan's identity as a woman couldn't be hidden anymore. However, these people also said that His Majesty had rewarded him. Did they not intend to pursue He Yan's crime of deceiving the emperor? This was rather surprising, but He Yunqing didn't have time to be happy about this at this moment. He only asked, "Official, you said that my sister was bestowed a marriage. May I ask which family she was bestowed a marriage with?" He Sui also came back to his senses at this time. Muan Lang and Marquis Wuan weren't the most important things. How could his daughter be betrothed as soon as she returned home? He, as her father, hadn't said anything yet. How could she casually find someone she didn't know about and marry him? He had heard of meat pies falling from the sky, but he had never heard of a son-in-law falling from the sky. "Master He, don't worry. I said that General Fengyun will be here soon." The eunuchs crossed his arms and smiled. "You mean," He Yunqing said in disbelief, "General Fengyun?" "That's right." At this moment, the sound of a carriage galloping could be heard not far away. Everyone looked towards the end of the street and saw a gorgeous carriage coming through the night. The person driving the horse was a tall imperial bodyguard. At first glance, he was different from ordinary imperial bodyguards. Just by looking at his face, he was more handsome. The eunuch smiled and said, "Aren't they here now?" The carriage stopped in front of the He family's house. At this time, the neighbors all got the news. In the middle of the night, they put on their clothes and climbed out of their beds to see the noble. They saw a man and a woman coming down from the carriage. The woman was He Yan. She grew up on this street. All the neighbors watched He Yan grow up. Today, she was wearing men's clothing. Her hair was casually scattered and her face was washed clean. She looked clean and beautiful. She had a heroic spirit that wasn't seen before. There were young men in the prime of their lives who were a little dazed. They thought that the eldest daughter of the He family was beautiful, but she wasn't beautiful to this extent. Now, she was a little dazzling. And the young man who helped her out of the carriage and stood beside her made the young ladies and young women on this street blush. This young man was also wearing an official's uniform. With a handsome appearance, it was obvious that he was a noble from the palace. In this shabby corner of their place, he was simply like a shining gem. When the eunuchs saw Xiao Ju, they hurriedly stepped forward and saluted, "Military Governor Xiao, Marquis Wuan greets you." It was unknown which stupid neighbor shouted, "Military Governor Xiao, this is old He's son-in-law, Military Governor Xiao." Military Governor Xiao, is he really that General Fengyun? Where? I also want to see, I also want to see. He Yan, Xiaoju had become a rare animal here. Everyone wanted to see her. The eunuchs also smiled. Military governor, I have already brought your message. I will return to the palace now. Then, he looked at He Sui, who was still in great shock and hadn't recovered yet. He felt a little disdainful in his heart. Why did he choose such a family? Look at this father-in-law, he was just a boorish martial artist. He didn't even know to invite the people who were on duty to come in for a cup of tea. He was really a country bumpkin. The next moment, Fei Nu consciously stepped forward and said that he had worked hard. He gave a piece of silver to each of the eunuchs present today. The head eunuchs weighed the extraordinarily heavy cloth bag in his hand and felt satisfied. Forget it. Although the country bumpkin was insensible, his son-in-law was generous and took good care of people. When he returned to the palace, he should say a few good words about him in front of the emperor. He Sui finally recovered and welcomed Xiaoju and the others into the house. He Yunsheng pushed out the neighbors who wanted to enter their house to continue watching Xiaoju. It's too late today. Another day, another day. Aunties, uncles and aunts, come another day. Go back and rest. After saying that, he closed the door with force. With his back against the door, he breathed a sigh of relief and ran into the hall. All the lamps in the room were lit, but other than the lamp that He Yunsheng used to read at night, which had more oil, there were only 3 oil lamps in the other rooms, and one of them had run out of oil. Qing Mei rummaged for a long time before she found some broken tea leaves. She quickly made some tea and handed it to Xiaoju. He Sui still felt that he was dreaming. He looked at He Yan. He was speechless. Yunsheng, didn't you tell father? He Yan asked curiously. He Yunsheng said impatiently, if I told father, how could he stay at home peacefully for so many days? He would have come looking for you a long time ago. TSK, she did not tell him. He Yan was in a dilemma. How should she tell him? She knew that He Sui would not be able to accept what she did at Jiang Rundu. That was why she threw this hot potato to He Yunsheng. Now that He Yunsheng didn't lay the groundwork for her, she didn't dare to say anything else. Xiaoju glanced at him, let me say it. The 2 men from the He family were shocked. Now that He Yan had given them a sum of money, the He family's house was not leaky. It looked like a proper house, but it could not escape the word simple. He Yan was one thing, after all, he had always grown up in this room. But Xiaoju sitting in this room was really out of place. He Sui felt that his own rattan chair, which was so rough that even the barbs had not been polished clean, had tarnished this young master's exquisite robes. Fortunately, this young master did not have any opinions about their shabby house. He also did not dislike the weak tea made from the dregs of the tea leaves. He did not have any patience on his face. He calmly told him how He Yan joined the army in Liangzhou and how he became Marquis Wuan and Muan Lang. He Sui was shocked and frightened. There were a few times when he picked up the teacup and gulped down the tea to calm himself down. He Yan thought that there was no need for him to go into such detail. After Xiaoju finished explaining, He Yunsheng and He Sui finally understood. So He Yan, who had hit the jackpot, had now become the first female marquis since the founding of the Great Wei Empire. But He Sui still felt that something was wrong. However, today's shocking news came one after another. He could not accept it properly and could not think of anything for a while. He could only look at He Yan and then at Xiaoju. Which family's daughter could be like his daughter? She went out, killed people, gained merit, became an official, and even brought back a man. Originally, when He Yan was infatuated with Fan Cheng, He Sui looked down on Fan Cheng. He thought that Fan Cheng was a young master who only knew how to squander money because of his family background. At first glance, he could tell that he was not someone who lived a peaceful life. His daughter had been pampered by him since she was young. If she married into Fan family, she would suffer a lot. Although Fan Cheng did not take He Yan as his official wife. Later, He Yan almost lost her life for Fan Cheng. After she woke up, she gradually forgot about Fan Cheng. He Sui was very happy. He only thought that after a few days, he would ask a matchmaker to help him find a suitable young man in Yanjing. Later, He Yan left Shuajing and joined the army. He Sui was already prepared that He Yan would not marry, or like him, take in a son-in-law. He did not expect that this time, He Yan did not even give him any leeway and directly let the current emperor bestow a marriage. That was the emperor. Fortunately, it was not some ugly melon and split dates. He Sui secretly looked at Xiaoju. He had only seen her from afar before, but this was the first time he was looking at her up close. Not to mention other things, he did not know how this child's parents gave birth to her. How could they give birth to such a perfect child? He Sui thought and glanced at He Yunsheng. Suddenly, he looked away in disappointment. Sigh, comparisons are odious. He Yunsheng was baffled. He Yan saw that He Sui was staring at Xiaoju. She was afraid that her father would ask something difficult to answer, so she quickly said, "It's too late today. If you have anything to say, we can talk about it another day." She then turned to Xiaoju and said, "Eldest young Master Xiao and eldest young Mistress Xiao should have already returned home. They have a lot of questions to ask you. Go back and explain. It's almost dawn." She gave Xiaoju a look, "Let's go." He Sui still wanted to ask, Yan, father still has questions. If you have questions, I'll answer them." He Yan was anxious. He pulled Xiaoju up from the chair and pulled him out. Xiaoju did not struggle. He turned his head and said to He Sui, "Uncle, I'll visit you another day." He Sui was shocked by the uncle. Before he could react, Xiaoju had already been dragged away by He Yan. "What did he call me just now?" The old father stood in the room and asked his inferior son. He Yunsheng disdainfully said, "It's not father." Previously, when Xiaoju gave him a horse at the racecourse, He Sui scolded him for being a good-for-nothing. Why didn't he take a look at himself? The word uncle made him feel dizzy. He was indeed his biological son. Xiaoju was dragged out of the house by He Yan. The neighbors who had come to watch the show had already dispersed. After all, it was a late autumn night. Even if they were curious and wanted to see the legendary General Fengyun, they could not squat in the corner in the cold wind for the entire night. There was no one on the street. Xiaoju let her drag him along without struggling. After they were out of the house, He Yan looked around with a guilty conscience. He only let go when he was sure it was safe. Xiaoju looked at her calmly and reminded her, "Your actions make it seem like I'm ashamed." He Yan came back to her senses and laughed. "The people on the street like to watch a show. Governor, I'm sure you don't like to be stared at." Xiaoju, "I don't hate it." He Yan thought, who would believe that? This person is usually alone. Now she's saying she doesn't hate it. A man's mouth was full of lies. She looked back at the door again. He Yunsheng and He Sui did not chase after them. Qing Mei was obedient and did not make any movements. He Yan sighed in relief. He Yan felt strange bringing Xiaoju back. It was mainly because Emperor Wen Xian's imperial edict was too sudden. He Yan was not prepared for it. She pushed Xiaoju out. She knew that it was time to say goodbye to Xiaoju, but she did not know what to say. When they were in the Liangzhou Guards and in Jiang, they got along very well. Why was it that when they were in Shua capital, she could not say a single word? She had been in the military for a few years and had a glib tongue. However, at this moment, she could only squeeze out 2 words. "Have a safe trip." Xiaoju could not help but laugh. He Yan asked, "What are you laughing at?" He bent down slightly so that his eyes were level with He Yan's. He curled his lips and teased her seriously. "Lady, he's not as good at lying anymore." "Damn it." He Yan said vaguely, "I've never lied to you." Xiaoju stood up straight and rubbed her head. "It's windy here. You should go back." He Yan nodded and looked up at him. She did not know why, but she felt a little reluctant. Ever since she joined the military, she had spent a lot of time with Xiao Ju. Now that she was back in Shuo capital and had regained her identity as a woman, it was impossible for her to spend time with Xiao Ju, let alone spend the night with him. Xiao Ju seemed to know what she was thinking and said, "Don't worry. I'll come and see you." He Yan blushed again and replied instinctively, "Yes, I'll come and see you too." As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized what she had said. She wanted to knock herself out so that she could muddle through this awkward conversation. He Yan knew that she would make a fool of herself if she stayed any longer. She turned around and said, "Then I'll go now. See you another day, Commander-in-Chief." She went into the house and closed the door. Xiao Ju stood at the door and looked at the closed door. After a while, he walked towards the carriage that was parked at the corner. Fei Nu skillfully pulled the reins and the carriage left the alley. The interrogation in the house was not over yet. Qing Mei did not dare to speak when there were outsiders. Now that there was no one else in the house, Qing Mei hugged her and cried. "Lady, it's great that you're still alive. This servant thought that she would never see you again. Sob, 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 how did you lose so much weight? Did you suffer outside? You must have." This girl had also grown up a lot. She was slender and elegant like a blooming flower, but her crybaby character was still the same as before. He Yan did not know whether to laugh or cry. It took him a lot of effort to comfort her. Before He Sui could speak, He Yan said, "Father, I've been tired all day and I'm very sleepy. Can I wash up and sleep first? I'll explain to you tomorrow." He Sui loved this daughter of his the most. He Yan would even pluck the stars from the sky for her. When she heard He Yan say that he was tired, her heart ached. She had already forgotten all her doubts and said, "Okay, okay, okay. Yan Yan, go to sleep first. If there's anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow." He Yan breathed a sigh of relief. She had to answer the questions one by one. He was afraid that he would not be able to sleep tonight. Besides, she had not thought about how to answer the questions. She still needed to use the night to think about it. With great difficulty, he managed to coax Qing Mei into smiling through her tears. He Sui sent her away. After He Yan did a simple wash in the courtyard, the moment he returned to his room, he saw the young master of the He family sitting on a chair, looking like he was about to launch a punitive expedition. He Yan closed the door behind him. "Yunsheng, are you going to catch a mouse in my room?" He Yunsheng's face was cold. "I'm not as easy to fool as father." "He Yan, tell me clearly. Why did you marry yourself off for no reason?" The tone of his words made him sound like an elder brother instead of a younger brother. "Don't talk nonsense. It was His Majesty who wanted me to marry him." He Yan walked to the edge of the couch and sat down. Although the bed in the He family was hard, her mattress was made soft by Qing Mei. He Yunsheng sneered, "You said earlier that you were living in a friend's house. Could it be that you were living in General Fengyun's residence?" He Yan. The child had grown up and was not easy to fool. He Yunsheng was furious. "He Yan. When I lived in his residence, I didn't know that I would be bestowed a marriage." He Yan tried to appease the anxious young master. "Moreover, we didn't live in the same room. What does it matter? You are a woman." "Yunsheng, I joined the army before." "Did you know that I joined the army? When I was in the Liang Province Guards, my brothers and I all lived in the same bed. There were more than a dozen people on the same bed. For me, it was too pretentious to say that men and women were different. It was impossible for me to do it." He Yunsheng was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The sisters of other families all scrupulously followed etiquette. It was not that He Yunsheng was pedantic. If it was someone else, it would be fine, but it just had to be a Xiao Ju. That kind of family was so outstanding. To put it bluntly, people with eyes would think that the He family was trying to climb up the social ladder. He Yan's thoughts were simple. What if Xiao Zhu or the Xiao family looked down on him because of this? This world had always been difficult for women. Gossip was a fearful thing. However, looking at He Yan in front of him yawning indifferently, He Yunqing's heart softened again. Forget it. It was already very good that he could come back alive. According to Xiao Zhu, every war that He Yan participated in was so dangerous. He had suffered so much, so why should he care about other things? However, the young man was still very concerned about another matter. He asked, since it was bestowed a marriage, does that General Fengyun like you or not? He Yan paused. In his mind, he recalled what Xiao Zhu had said in the palace. It was not fake. The words he said in the palace were not fake. That meant that the person of his dreams was real. She lowered her head and looked at the jade pendant on her waist. The giant python on the jade pendant was dangerous and docile. It was entrenched in the clouds like a magnificent dream. The moon is yours. Even after such a long time, these words still sounded so moving. However, He Yan suddenly widened his eyes. How did Xiao Zhu know that he was the moon? Chapter 203. Just as He Yan was tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep, Xiao Zhu, who had just returned to the Xiao family, bumped into Xiao Jing and his wife, who had been waiting at the door for a long time. Bai Rongwei didn't even have time to change her clothes. She and Xiao Zhu were sitting in the main hall, waiting for Xiao Zhu to return. Xiao Jing immediately asked, Huaijin, what's going on? He Gong. How could Miss be a miss? Xiao family was in a state of turmoil and chaos. It was already shocking enough that they found out during the banquet that the young master living in their house was a girl. The emperor even went as far as to grant a marriage. No matter how magnanimous their family was, they couldn't change the fact that Xiao Zhu's good friend had turned into his wife. The only thing they were sure of was that Xiao Zhu definitely liked Miss He. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said those things in front of all the civil and military officials. Now that they thought about it, everything, such as wanting He Yan to live in his courtyard, always seeming to protect him, were now explained. They had just explained the same thing to He Sui at the He family, and now they had to explain it to Xiao Jing. Fortunately, they were family, so Xiao Zhu didn't go into too much detail. He just gave a rough summary so that the husband and wife could understand. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei barely understood, and they looked at each other. Bai Rongwei probed, Huaijin, do you really like Miss He? Xiao Zhu calmly said, if it's fake, then can the Xiao family go against the emperor's decree? Bai Rongwei was speechless. Of course, they couldn't. His lips curled, if it's fake, then there wouldn't be this marriage. Xiao Zhu seemed to be indifferent to the affairs of the imperial court, but that did not mean that she did not have any connections. He was the one who pushed for this marriage to achieve his goal. If he didn't like He Yan, he didn't have to do this. Even if Emperor Wen Xian had the intention, he could have done something to ruin the marriage. But, Bai Rongwei grumbled, you child, it's fine if you're happy, but how could you just bring the girl home? Although there's nothing going on between me and your big brother, if outsiders find out, it's hard to avoid gossiping and damaging Miss He's reputation. Previously, her identity was unknown, so it was not appropriate to bring her home. If we brought her home, no one would know. Xiao Zhu said, this will not happen again in the future. Only then did the couple heave a sigh of relief. In the past, he had always been worried that with Xiao Zhu's personality, he would not want to get married in this lifetime. Now that he finally knew that he liked girls, it was a good thing. But he was afraid that the young man's nature would be greedy for a moment of pleasure, and it would be over if he caused trouble. Now that they saw that he knew what he was doing, the couple was slightly relieved. Then where is Miss He from? Where does she live? Is there anyone else in her family? Bai Rongwei asked him. When the young master of the Lin family left, he mentioned that Miss He's father was a military officer. Since we are already in-laws, and her parents are no longer here, your big brother and I should pay a visit. We can't let people think that we don't understand etiquette. That's right, Xiao Jing also said, we should go and discuss the details of the marriage with Master He. We also need to prepare your betrothal gifts. This marriage decree came suddenly, so the family didn't prepare anything. These years, the emperor had bestowed many gifts, but Xiao Ju himself was too lazy to take care of it. Bai Rongwei had carefully stored it in the storeroom for him. Originally, he thought that it would be 3 to 5 years before he could use it, but he didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. From beginning to end, the couple didn't care about He Yan's family background. Even when they asked about He Yan's family, they just wanted to understand the situation. The elders above them had all passed away. The eldest brother was the father, and the eldest sister-in-law was the mother. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei weren't vain people. When Xiao Jing married Bai Rongwei, the rumors were rampant in the capital. The relatives of the Xiao family strongly opposed it, but in the end, Bai Rongwei, the Shu daughter, still became the eldest wife of the Xiao family. Therefore, for He Yan, they thought that as long as his family background was clean and his character wasn't bad, it was enough. What does Miss He like? With something to do, Bai Rongwei felt that the burden on her shoulders had become heavier. Xiao family members were simple, so it was easy to manage. She didn't usually have any disputes with Xiao Jing. Now that Xiao Ju's marriage was finally settled, she felt that she had to handle this matter beautifully. How about I go buy some beautiful silk cloth tomorrow? Then I'll buy some jewelry, but it can't be too expensive or it'll be disrespectful. How old is Master He? Since he's a military officer, he's bound to have some difficulties. Let's buy some tonics. She spoke in detail. She was so engrossed in her discussion with Xiao Jing that she didn't even notice when Xiao Ju slipped away. When she finally reacted and was about to ask Xiao Ju for her opinion, she realized that the chair in front of her was already empty. Xiao Ju returned to her room, took off her court robe, put it on the chair, and sat down on the edge of the bed. The room was dimly lit, and there were faint sounds of bustling outside. It was probably Bai Rongwei instructing the servants to take out the key to open the storeroom. Everyone was shocked tonight, so they wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. But, at least it wasn't all for nothing. Emperor Wen Xian's marriage bestowment came at the right time. Not only did it remove Chu Zhao, that eyesore, from the equation, it also settled the matter between him and He Yan. The emperor's mind wasn't clear for all these years, but he finally did something right. Previously, he thought that He Yan admired Chu Zhao, so even though he had many things on his mind, he didn't want to mention it to He Yan. In this world, there were people who would do anything to take what they liked by force. For people like him, the one thing he hated the most was being forced. But, he wasn't being forced. He lowered his eyes and took out a sachet. The sachet was turned inside out. The delicate embroidery on the outside was turned inside out, and the coarse cloth inside was turned outside. Inside the sachet, the crooked corners and the pockmarked embroidery of the moon sparkled under the dim light. It was a little ugly, but he even added some gold thread. The handsome young man lowered his head and couldn't help but laugh. In the small room outside, Qi Wu threw a punch. Fei Nu caught it firmly and turned it to the side. Calm down. Did you already know? Qi Wu was so angry that his nose was crooked. I was wondering why you always looked like you wanted to say something but didn't when I didn't like him. Why is it that every time I'm worried about young master's marriage, I'm sweating profusely, but you're so calm and carefree? So it's not that you're careless, but that you already knew. You and I have worked together for young master. We've been brothers for so many years, but you hid it from me. Doesn't your conscience hurt? Fei Nu dodged his punch again. He was also speechless. When did I hide it from you? When we were in Jiang City, didn't you see how he looked like in women's clothing? How could you still think that Miss He is a man? Qi Wu was stunned. That was true. He Yan had worn women's clothing before. When he was wearing skirts in Jiang City, Cui Yuezhi and his concubine, Princess Mu Hongjin of Jiang, the commoners, and the peddlers on the street, no one doubted He Yan's identity as a woman. Her eyebrows were beautiful, and her figure was slim. If she wasn't really a girl, how could no one find out? I thought it was because he looked like a girl. Chi Wu said in a daze. Besides, how could I believe that a girl would go to the Liangzhou guard and throw 20 stone dumbbells in a row? Even a strong man couldn't beat her. And she ate so much. He never doubted He Yan's identity as a woman. It wasn't because He Yan didn't dress well as a woman, but because she dressed as a man too well. Which young lady would be able to sit among a group of men and listen to their vulgar words without batting an eyelid? Sometimes, he could even say a few words. Fei Nu patted his good friend's shoulder. Don't think too much. Weren't you always afraid that young master would be called gay by the people of Shuo capital? Miss He is a woman. Now, what you're worried about won't happen. That's true. Chi Wu sat down sullenly. But now that I think about it, I feel like I'm very stupid. It's not that you're stupid. Fei Nu said from the bottom of his heart. It's because Miss He does a lot of things better than men. Fei Nu asked himself honestly. If Xiao Ju didn't ask wanting to find out about He Yan's background, and accidentally found out that He Yan was a woman, what would he do? Even if He Yan wore a dress and stood in front of him, he would probably have the same reaction as Fei Nu. He would think that this person was so outstanding in women's clothing. However, it was useless to think about this now. Now that young master had gotten what he wanted, and this young madam was also a capable and brave person. If news of tonight's matter spread out, Shuo capital would probably set off a huge wave tomorrow. In reality, Fei Nu was right. Before tomorrow, the people who had interacted with He Yan in the past, when they found out that He Yan was a woman and that he was going to marry Xiao Ju, they couldn't believe their ears. In the barracks, Hong Shan's group of people were lying on their bunks, scratching their feet and chatting. After returning to the capital, they were stationed at the foot of a mountain not far from the capital. Here, they still practiced daily, but compared to Liangzhou, it was much better. At least there were fields at the foot of the mountain. When they weren't practicing, the soldiers in the barracks would help the farmers and get some fresh vegetables and fruits. Shuo capital also didn't have as much wind and sand as Liangzhou. Therefore, in less than a month after returning to the capital, everyone was already rounder. Those who lived in Shuo capital were able to leave the barracks one day a month to visit their families. Jiang Jiao had just gone to find the military instructor to arrange for a few days before returning home. As he was walking back to his room, he saw a small person rushing into his room. His movements were as fast as the wind. Jiang Jiao remembered this small person. His surname was Bao. Because he liked to inquire about trivial matters and was well informed, everyone called him Bao Inquire. After a long time, no one remembered his original name. They only remembered that he was called Bao Inquire. Looking at his posture, he must have gotten some big news. Jiang Jiao followed him unhurriedly. These days, they were in Shuo capital and it was very boring. He Yan now had an official title, so if he wasn't here, he would miss him. Bao Inquire ran into Hong Shan's room. Everyone was chatting. He jumped onto the table in the middle of the room and was scolded by everyone. Your feet are covered in mud. Hurry up and get down. That's where I eat. Bao Inquire, are you trying to rebel? Just talk. Why are you moving your feet? Wang Ba, Huang Xiong, and other people in the room were not to be trifled with. Normally, Bao Inquire would have jumped down obediently after hearing this. However, today was different. Not only did he not move, he seemed to be even more agitated. His face and neck were red. Big news, big news. I just came back from the military instructor's place. Big news, there's no news more important than this. People passing by the other rooms gathered around. It was rare to see Bao Inquire rambling like this. It must be big news. Someone asked, what's the matter? Is military governor Xiao getting married? This was just a casual question because there were 10 impossibilities in the Liangzhou guards. For example, Shen Han couldn't be soft-hearted, Liang Ping couldn't not scold people, Ma Damei couldn't not gamble. The biggest impossibility, which was also the one that everyone thought was unshakable, was that Xiao Ju couldn't get married. If this impossibility was broken, then it would be considered big news. However, it should be impossible. As they were thinking this, Bao Inquirer nodded. Yes, yes. That's right. Military Governor Xiao is getting married. Everyone didn't react at first. When they realized what was going on, they immediately became excited. They surrounded the table and asked Bao Inquirer. Who is Military Governor Xiao marrying? Are you sure it's Military Governor Xiao who's getting married and not someone else? Bao Inquirer, is your information accurate or not? Why do I feel like it's not reliable? Does Military Governor Xiao look like someone who would get married? I think it's fake. Let's disperse. Don't fall for it. Bao Inquirer was furious when he heard this. The veins on his neck bulged. He clenched his fists and stomped his feet. Why would I lie? I heard everything clearly. The military instructors were all scared. His Majesty personally bestowed the marriage. When the words, bestowed the marriage, came out, half of the people inside and outside the room believed it. Military Governor Xiao couldn't possibly take the initiative to get married. However, bestowing the marriage was something that His Majesty had given. How could he go against His Majesty's orders? Now that he said it, it wasn't impossible. Xiaomai asked, is it really a bestowed marriage? Then His Majesty bestowed the marriage to Military Governor Xiao. Which family's young miss is it? A person outside was leaning against the window and listening. When he heard this, he answered without thinking, of course it's young Miss Shen from Censor Shen's residence. Shen Mushue had stayed in the Liang province guards for so long and helped many wounded soldiers. This young miss didn't despise them and even gave them medicine. The soldiers all liked her very much and spoke up for her. Yes, young Miss Shen and the commander-in-chief are a match made in heaven. They're a golden couple, a talented man and a beautiful woman. They should be the most compatible couple in the way. Bao Inquirer's answer disappointed them. No, it's not Dr. Shen. Everyone looked at each other. It's actually not Shen Mushue. Young Miss Shen was such a kind-hearted deity. Even she couldn't become Xiao Ju's wife. Which family's young miss was bestowed the marriage by His Majesty? If it's not Dr. Shen, then who is it? Bao Inquirer, it's He Yan. When the two words, He Yan, came out, the inside and outside of the room quieted down a bit. Wang Ba, who had been lazily dozing off, sat up. Jiang Jiao had just entered the room and heard this sentence. He thought there was something wrong with his ears. Which He Yan? Shi Tu was the most composed and asked. It's He Yan from our Liang province guards. Someone laughed. Bao Inquirer, are you drunk? You're faking His Majesty's edict. If you're not careful, you'll be sued. He Yan is a man. How could His Majesty bestow a marriage to two men? Are you crazy? Or is this He Yan with the same name? At this time, Bao Inquirer wasn't in a rush. He knew that his words would explode among the recruits of the Liang province guards, no, even among the soldiers of the southern prefecture. Who told him to have good ears and be the first to hear such big news? Who says His Majesty can't bestow a marriage to two men? His gaze swept over everyone in the room. Only when he took in everyone's expressions did he say unhurriedly, besides, He Yan is a woman. Of course she can be Military Governor Zhao's wife. Kuang Dang, Liang Ping's foot slipped and he fell flat on his face. However, he wasn't in a hurry to grimace in pain. Instead, he looked towards Shen Han, his gaze filled with doubt. What did you say? He Yan is a woman, Shen Han said with a cold expression. Don't be fooled by how calm he looked right now. Heaven knew how much disbelief he had felt when Tian Lang, the vice soldier of the southern prefecture guards, came to tell him this news. He Yan was a woman. How was this possible? How could there be a woman in this world who could eat more than a man, fight more than a man, and adapt to the harsh climate and training of the Liang province guards better than a man? When the instructors heard this news, they all collectively sank into a silence filled with doubt. No matter what, they couldn't imagine that the person who was sweating like rain on the martial arts field, yet was so carefree and cheerful, personally taking the heads of two of Rida and Muzi's personal guards, was a woman. This was clearly a youth with exceptional talent, so how could he be a woman? A woman could reach this level, yet they were easily defeated by He Yan. There wasn't a single person in the Liang province guards who could compare to He Yan. Didn't this mean that all of them, as grown men, couldn't compare to a 16 or 17-year-old little girl? If it was said that He Yan was a woman, they were only shocked, then the fact that His Majesty bestowed a marriage between Xiao Ju and He Yan made these instructors tremble with fear. Before Tian Lang left, he kindly and subtly reminded Shen Han, the military governor values Miss He greatly. What a joke, how could he just value her? This iron tree that hadn't bloomed in 10,000 years was blooming for the first time in front of the civil and military officials of the imperial court, in front of the emperor and the empress. As soon as the celebratory banquet ended, rumors spread everywhere about how the military governor of the Right Army treated his sweetheart gently. Then here came the question. If military governor Xiao was so considerate to his sweetheart, then how much was military governor Zhao's dissatisfaction with these devilish instructors who tortured and trained his sweetheart, often making the little girl run with weights and standing in the sun for several hours? It was hard to say. Ma Damiai's face was pale. Previously, during the winter in Liang province, I soaked in the hot spring with Miss He. Everyone's faces were ashen, especially the instructor who had been the happiest at that time. He was about to cry. They now understood why He Yan refused to go into the hot spring in every possible way and even said that he had a hidden illness. It turned out that he was actually a girl. Fortunately, Xiao Ju didn't appear at that time. Otherwise, if things continued to develop, perhaps all the instructors in the room would have hidden illnesses. Then, what should we do now? Someone asked in a trembling voice. What do you mean, what should we do? Shen Han said, just do your own thing. It has nothing to do with you. Although now it seemed that it was stupid of him to believe that He Yan and Xiao Ju had broken up, Shen Han felt that he was quite farsighted. At least he could see the unusual atmosphere between the two at a glance, right? Shen Han didn't stray from the path of standing between these two people. Now, he just changed from a man to a woman. What was wrong with that? Anyway, he had always stood firmly on the side of Xiao Ju and He Yan. He Yan was a person with a temperament. He probably wouldn't bite the hand that fed him, right? Chu Linfeng's residence was also very happy today. Shi Jinbo was said to be an official in the Shuo capital, but these years, he was no longer as glorious as before. Chu Linfeng had 3 legitimate sons. Other than the eldest son who got a small official position in the Shuo capital, which was bought by Madame Chu with money, the other 2 legitimate sons didn't get to be officials. On the contrary, the illegitimate son who was brought back from outside became the most promising one. Not only was he the current prime minister's favorite student, but he was also the prime minister's son-in-law. With this relationship, the Chu family would definitely prosper in the future. Thinking of this, Chu Linfeng was very proud. When the celebration ended and he returned to his residence, he immediately sent people to spread the news and buy things. He also said that he wanted to renovate Chu Zhao's courtyard so that Su Pingting wouldn't think their courtyard was shabby after she married into the Chu family. Madame Chu coldly looked at Chu Linfeng's undisguised joy and didn't say anything. Her 3 sons, however, were a little angry. After Chu Linfeng left, they complained to Madame Chu, "Father is too biased. He's just the son of a brothel girl and he's already like this. When we 3 brothers got married, Father wasn't as happy as he is today." These words were true. Although Chu Linfeng didn't treat his 3 sons badly, he still disliked them for being too mediocre. In comparison, he preferred Chu Zhao, who could make him proud in front of his colleagues. When Chu Zhao first came to the Chu family, the 3 brothers bullied him a lot. Madame Chu also wanted to get rid of Chu Zhao when he grew up, just like those concubines. The worst part was that the boy had somehow learned to be so cunning. He had made Chu Linfeng so happy that he took him everywhere. Madame Chu couldn't find a chance to make a move on him. Later on, he even had a relationship with Prime Minister Su. Madame Chu didn't dare to make a move on Prime Minister Su's people. His mother relied on her face to make a living. She gave birth to a son like that. Third young Master Chu's words were especially harsh. Fourth young Master Chu is better than his mother. At least he sold his body to the capital's Su family for a good price. Madame Chu frowned. Although she didn't like Chu Zhao and wanted Chu Zhao to die in the suburbs tomorrow, she didn't want her sons to become as mean as a woman because of this. Sometimes, when she thought about it, it was no wonder that Chu Linfeng doted on Chu Zhao. These 3 sons of his were probably spoiled since they were young. Compared to Chu Zhao, they were indeed much worse. Are we just going to let that kid have a meteoric rise? Eldest young Master Chu said unwillingly. If that happens, we won't have a say in the Chu family in the future. Don't worry. Madame Chu laughed and said in a gloomy tone, do you really think that it's so easy to marry the Prime Minister's daughter? Don't forget that Chu Xilan has a femme fatale, Ying Xiang. Chapter 204. The news that He Yan was a woman and that she was betrothed to Xiao Ju by His Majesty didn't stop there. The Shen family in the capital was dead silent today. Shen Muxua knelt on the ground and lowered his head without saying a word. Eldest young Master Shen and Madame Shen stood aside. Madame Shen looked worried and wanted to say something. After a while, eldest young Master Shen opened his mouth and looked at Censor Shen, who was standing in the hall with his hands behind his back and a cold face. He softly comforted him, my sister was confused for a moment. Father, don't blame her too much. Confused for a moment? Censor Shen turned around and his gaze fell on Shen Muxue. It was unclear whether he was distressed or angry. He said, my Shen family is proud and loyal. I didn't expect to raise a daughter. I don't know when she learned those dirty tricks. She was confused for a moment. If she is not careful, she will harm others' lives. Censor Shen was very thin and handsome. Although he was old now, one could still see some of his charm when he was young. The arrogance and coldness in his eyes were the same as Shen Muxue's. He was usually strict with his son but was especially tolerant with his daughter. This was the first time he was angry with Shen Muxue. Even when Shen Muxue insisted on going to the border with Xiao Ju, Censor Shen was not as angry as he was today. You can't say that. Madame Shen felt sorry for her daughter. He Yan is a woman. Muxue was just telling the truth. If she didn't deceive His Majesty first, how could her identity be exposed by others? She should be punished for her mistakes. You keep saying that Muxue is wrong, but Muxue is really thinking for His Majesty. You can't let a woman use a man's identity to deceive others, right? As soon as she spoke, Censor Shen looked at her coldly. Madame Shen did not dare to speak. Censor Shen said, ridiculous. You only saw her disguise as a man to join the army and deceive the world. Why didn't you see her lead the army to fight against the Yudo? Jiang Water Battle, Runda City Defense. Do you think it is easy to earn merits? If she didn't have the merit of saving lives, how could His Majesty promote her to Marquis Wuan so easily? Moreover, he stared at his daughter. I heard that when we were in Liangzhou, there was a spy who infiltrated the city guard institution. You didn't know the details, and He Yan sent you away. No matter what the result was, she was always helping you. I've taught you since you were young that you should repay the kindness of a drop of water with a gushing spring. If you owe someone a favor, even if they don't take it to heart, you should remember it in your heart. I didn't expect you to remember it like this. Shen Muxue hung his head in silence. I also didn't expect, Censor Shen seemed to want to finish his sentence in one breath, not only did you want to be the villain who exposed her identity, but you also didn't dare to stand out openly and wanted to hide behind Wang Rong. Did you know that by doing this, you would also harm Wang Rong? Shen Muxue trembled slightly. At the palace banquet, the stranger who revealed He Yan's identity was called Wang Rong. She was also her Qing Mei childhood sweetheart. The two of them had known each other for a long time. Wang Rong's father and Censor Shen were good friends. Shen Muxue knew that Wang Rong liked him, but her heart was completely focused on Xiao Ju. It wasn't that she didn't think of personally exposing her, but in the end, she couldn't bear to do it. She was afraid that He Yan would lose his life because of this. She didn't want to take He Yan's life. She only hoped that He Yan would stay away from Xiao Ju. She was even more afraid of Xiao Ju's disappointed and cold gaze. When Wang Rong came to the Shen residence, she saw Shen Muxue's worries and asked. Shen Muxue couldn't help but reveal his confusion and worries. After listening, Wang Rong didn't say a word. She turned and left, saying, "Wait." "Wait for what?" He didn't say. "I didn't expect him to do this." Shen Muxue weakly explained. Her father, Censor Shen, stared at her with a sharp gaze. His voice was like a knife that could cut her open. "You really didn't expect it?" Shen Muxue was speechless. She really didn't expect it. Wang Rong liked her for many years. For her, she was willing to do anything. She was impulsive and didn't care about the consequences. When she told Wang Rong about this, didn't she expect Wang Rong's reaction? She just didn't want to admit that she was such a despicable person. Seeing Shen Muxue trembling, eldest young Master Shen's heart softened. He said, "Even so, sister already knows her mistake. Father, you also know that sister has been in love with Xiao Huaijin for many years. How can sister feel good when another woman suddenly appeared? Sister has never liked to tell others about her grievances. It's my fault as her brother that I didn't think it through. That's why I didn't realize it until now. Father, if you want to punish, then punish me as well. It has nothing to do with elder brother. I made a mistake. I'll take responsibility for my own actions." Shen Muxue knelt straight. "You liked Xiao Huaijin for so many years. Did he respond to you at all?" Censor Shen suddenly said. Shen Muxue looked at him. "Love never changes from being moved." Censor Shen said faintly. "You wanted to go outside and leave Shuo Jing to be by his side. Although I didn't support it, I didn't oppose it either. I knew that Xiao Huaijin wouldn't fall in love with you, but I always thought that as long as you left the residence, walked a wider road, and met more people, your heart would naturally be broader. Gradually, you would let go of him. I didn't expect," he sighed, "that it would push you deeper and deeper." Shen Muxue pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Even her father could tell that Xiao Ju wouldn't fall in love with her. She had never felt that she was such a failure. These words were too harsh. Madame Shen couldn't help but say angrily, "How can there be a father like you in this world? That Xiao Huaijin didn't like Mu Shui, it's his own fault. I don't like him. A woman entering the military camp for no reason. I don't know what saving the common people is. I only know that all the rules are messed up. Xiao Huaijin would rather marry such a woman than be afraid of being laughed at by the world." Eldest young Master Shen wanted to say something but stopped. This time, Censor Shen didn't pay attention to his wife's rebuttal. He only looked at Shen Muxue and said, "The places you've traveled are no less than He Yan. The people you've met may not be less than He Yan, but your outlook and ideals are much worse than hers. It's not that I don't believe you, but after tonight, the difference between the two of you will be obvious. You're not as good as her." Shen Muxue's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. She had been strong all her life and didn't want to cry in front of others. However, at this moment, she couldn't hold back her grievances and shame. Censor Shen didn't look at her anymore. He said calmly, "From today onwards, you are not allowed to go anywhere. Our Shen family doesn't use force. If you make a mistake, you will be grounded at home for a year." "Master." Censor Shen didn't pay attention to his wife's pleas. He flicked his sleeves and left the hall. The night wind outside the courtyard was extremely cold. When it blew on one's face, it was as painful as a knife. Eldest young Master Shin caught up and walked to Sensor Shin's side. Father, isn't a year too long? Sensor Shin looked at the bricks on the ground and smiled bitterly. Xiao Huijin is a protective person. Do you think that he won't be able to find out that it was Mu Shui? But, because of his father, he won't do anything to Mu Shui. However, in these years, the relationship between our family and Xiao family ends here. Of course, these people weren't the only ones who were shocked by this. In the Qing family, the relatives who heard about Xiao Ju's marriage were all shocked and suspicious. Everything was going well, but His Majesty suddenly bestowed a marriage. They were busy being surprised by the marriage and didn't pay much attention to He Yan. They only knew that his family didn't have any official position, and his status wasn't comparable to Bai Rongwei's. As for Qing Lisu, compared to Xiao Ju's marriage, he was more surprised that He Yan was a woman. My eldest brother, how could he be a woman? The young boy paced back and forth in the room, unconsciously tugging at the corner of his clothes. How could this be? When he first returned to the capital, he was caught by the Qing family and thrown into school to study. He was only allowed to go home once a month. On the day he went home, he was locked in the house to practice calligraphy and couldn't go anywhere. Therefore, when Xiao Ju and the others returned to the capital, Qing Lisu didn't even have the chance to visit the Xiao family. When he finally returned home this month, not only did he hear that Xiao Ju and He Yan were back, he also received good news that His Majesty had bestowed a marriage upon the two of them. My eldest brother. He grabbed a servant and said, can kill a tiger with one punch. How could he be a woman? Heavens, was he crazy, or was it the world that was crazy? No, I have to go find uncle. He opened the door and walked out. He wanted to find Xiao Ju and ask him about it. No, young master and madam said that you can't leave the manor. Someone, the young master wants to go out. The servant behind him hurriedly followed. Woo, you're all liars. In the Song family, Song Tao was crying. How could my brother he be a woman? You must be lying. The little girl's eyes were swollen from crying. Madam Song and Master Song stood outside the door and looked at each other helplessly. Ever since Song Tao returned from the capital, she had become much more obedient. Every day, she would practice the 4 arts at home. Madam Song suspected that she had someone she liked. If she really did have someone she liked, what would happen to her marriage with the Qing family? They knew Song Tao's temperament very well. In the past, she didn't know what it felt like to like someone. Qing Lisu was also a lively young man. The two of them thought that after spending time together, their feelings would naturally develop. However, if she had someone else in her heart, they were afraid that the marriage would become an enemy. It wasn't that Madame Song didn't ask Song Tao who the person in her heart was. Every time, Song Tao would fool her. The little girl was very smart. She knew that He Yan's status wasn't high. Even if she told her parents, they wouldn't agree. It was better to wait a little longer. With that young man's ability, it was only a matter of time before he became a high-ranking official. Before that, she didn't need to tell anyone. She just needed to catch him. It wasn't until tonight that the news of Xiao Ju's betrothal came. Song Tao went on a hunger strike at home, crying and throwing a tantrum. She was so upset that she wanted to hang herself. It was only then that Madame Song and Old Master Song found out that their daughter's sweetheart was Xiao Ju's fiancé. The couple didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Tao, don't cry. You're a girl. Crying is useless. Quickly wipe your tears. Your eyes are swollen like walnuts. That's right. Anyway, young Master Cheng's uncle is Military Governor Xiao. If you like Miss He, when you marry young Master Cheng in the future, you can often visit Xiao family. Won't you be able to see Miss He often? It would have been better if she didn't hear it. Once she heard it, Song Tao became even more sad. Who wants to visit Xiao family? She cheated my feelings. I don't want to see her anymore. Woo. This side was in turmoil and chaos. On the other side, people didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There were also people who were like stray dogs. They were anxious and uneasy. When they returned to the residence, they saw that everyone was traumatized. Su Zhiheng couldn't fall asleep. When he returned to the residence, he told He Xining that he had a lot of official documents to deal with today. He told He Xining to sleep early. Then, he locked himself in the study. He Xining got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. When she thought of Su Zhiheng, she found a thick mattress from the cabinet. The weather was getting colder. Su Zhiheng slept in the study. It was warmer than sleeping in the bedroom. If he caught a cold, it would be troublesome. She carried the mattress to the study. However, she found that the lights were on and there was no one in the study. He Xining sat on a chair in the study for a while. She thought that perhaps Su Zhiheng would come back in a while. She didn't expect that after 15 minutes, there was still no movement. She was stunned. She was worried and suspicious. Even if he went to the toilet, it was still too long. Could something have happened to him? Last year, there was a family in the capital who got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. The floor was covered in frost. It was dark and they couldn't see clearly. When they stepped on the frost, they slipped. When the servants found them the next day, they were already gone. She was worried that Su Zhiheng had fallen somewhere. She didn't dare to disturb others. She left the mattress in the study and went around looking for him with a lantern. She didn't find her parents-in-law's courtyard. She only walked around her own courtyard. She didn't find Su Zhiheng's figure. It was so late. Could it be that he went out of the residence? He Xining thought for a while. She didn't know why, but for some strange reason, she turned her gaze to the courtyard next to hers, He Yan's courtyard. This courtyard was where her elder sister, the short-lived eldest Madame Su, used to live. After He Yan's death, this courtyard was sealed and all the servants in the courtyard were dismissed. However, He Xining once heard a rumor that there weren't many servants serving He Yan. Sometimes, those servants were assigned to serve another concubine of the Su family. He Xining was skeptical about this rumor. In any case, she was still a daughter of the He family. No matter how bold the Su family was, they wouldn't dare to neglect her. Moreover, He Xining didn't see that concubine after entering the residence. When he asked, she only said that she made a mistake and was kicked out. He Xining was well aware that the Su family might have done this because they were afraid that she, as the new bride, would feel uncomfortable. However, since they valued her so much, they wouldn't treat He Yan badly. After a long time, He Xining forgot about this matter and thought it was just a rumor that couldn't be taken seriously. However, there were some strange things about He Yan. For example, this courtyard. The Su family said that Su Zhiheng missed his wife, so he left this courtyard empty and didn't let anyone else live in it. However, He Xining had never seen Su Zhiheng go to this courtyard. Wouldn't someone who missed his wife often go to places where she used to live and pick up old things to reminisce? However, perhaps Su Zhiheng was afraid that he would think of her when he saw the things, so he deliberately didn't go. He Xining found an excuse for Su Zhiheng. She was originally a bit jealous of He Yan, but now, she didn't feel any jealousy at all. There was no meaning in fighting with a dead person, especially when He Xining didn't feel that He Yan was a threat to her. In other words, she didn't feel Su Zhiheng's unforgettable love for He Yan. The lantern gave off a faint light, and the wind outside blew, blowing away all of her sleepiness. She looked at the dark and empty courtyard and thought for a while. She couldn't help but move her feet, heading towards that place. She had only been to this courtyard once, not long after she married into the Su family. However, she only went as far as the courtyard. When He Xining wanted to enter the room, a servant girl came out and quietly said, "Young mistress, the young master doesn't allow others to enter this courtyard." He Xining was a new bride at that time and didn't want to quarrel with Su Zhiheng over this matter, so she left. After a long time, she didn't want to go back. Tonight, she didn't know why, but she inexplicably wanted to go and take a look. He Yen was previously recuperating in the farmstead, and after returning to the He family, she quickly got married. Speaking of which, she didn't spend much time with this older sister of hers. So much so that she almost couldn't remember what He Yen looked like. But perhaps, she could still see the place He Yen lived and catch a glimpse of the traces of blood relatives who once lived there. Unknowingly, she had already walked to the courtyard. The courtyard was as cold as always. Whether it was summer or autumn, it was always as cold as winter. The servant girls cleaned the ground, but they couldn't get rid of the old and decadent air. He Xining slowly walked to the door and was about to push it open when suddenly, she paused. There was a sound in the room. She was nervous at first, afraid that there was a thief in the courtyard, but after hearing the sound, she felt that the thief wouldn't be so daring. So, she carried the lantern and secretly walked to the bedside, peeking through the gap in the paper window. The oil lamp in the room was lit, and she saw Su Zhiheng. A Su Zhiheng who was completely different from his usual self. Su Zhiheng was still wearing the clothes he wore when he entered the palace today. He was an extremely particular person. Normally, after returning to the residence, he would take a bath and change his clothes, but he didn't today. He sat in front of the large table in the room, frantically opening the wooden drawer over and over again, rummaging through it. His movements were very rough, no longer as gentle and refined as before. From the angle of the window, he looked like a complete madman. He Xining's heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran down her spine from head to toe. Looking at her strange husband, she actually felt a sense of fear in her heart. In her panic, she accidentally stepped on the Shirtu. Bang! The Shirtu slipped and fell down the steps in the courtyard, making a loud noise. Who is it? At the same time, Su Zhiheng raised his head from inside the room. He pulled open the door with a whoosh and rushed out, shouting, "Who's there?" He Xining was scared out of her wits. For a moment, she suddenly wanted to run away. She felt that Su Zhiheng would turn into an evil spirit in the next moment and pounce on her to take her life. She forced a smile, stood up, and said, "It's me." Su Zhiheng narrowed his eyes and looked at the person in front of him. After a while, the viciousness and nervousness in his eyes gradually faded away and was replaced by a smile. However, this smile was stiff and perfunctory no matter how one looked at it. His tone was also a little anxious. "Xining, why are you here?" "I was afraid that husband would be cold at night, so I took the mattress and went to the study to look for you, but I couldn't find you. I was worried that husband would fall in the dark at night, so I took the lantern and went around looking for you." She saw that Su Zhiheng's expression was somewhat nervous, and her heart was moved. She smiled and said, "I only came to try my luck. I didn't think that husband would really be here. Husband must have missed big sister." Su Zhiheng stared blankly for a moment, then agreed. "Yes." He Xining sighed and said sadly, "It's a good thing that husband is in love, but, sometimes you have to think about your own body." Su Zhiheng closed the door and covered He Xining's eyes. He pulled He Xining's hand and walked out. "Forget it, it's cold outside. Don't catch a cold with me. Let's go back." His hand was so cold that it seemed as if there wasn't a trace of life in it. He Xining obediently replied, "Husband, didn't I tell you before that I wanted to take advantage of mid-autumn to go up the mountain to pray to the Bodhisattva? My mother is finally free these few days. I want to go up the mountain the day after tomorrow and pray for big sister in heaven. Is that okay?" Su Zhiheng's expression stiffened for a moment. "Okay. Husband, do you want to go together?" He Xining asked. "I won't be going," Su Zhiheng replied. "I'm very busy these few days, so I might not be able to accompany you up the mountain." When He Xining heard this, she didn't get angry. She just smiled and said, "It's okay, then I'll count your share and pray to the Bodhisattva. Husband is busy with important matters of the country, so the Bodhisattva won't blame you." She was very obedient and considerate. She was also very good at saying things that flattered people. She was a smart woman, but also very stupid. This was what Su Zhiheng liked about her. Compared to He Yan, it was much easier to put on an act in front of He Xining. His heart gradually relaxed. The fear he felt when he heard that familiar name at tonight's celebration banquet was also washed away by the two of them. He Yan was already dead. The dead wouldn't come back. Then the living person was just pretending to be a ghost. Together with He Rufei, he would thoroughly investigate the background of the person who was pretending to be a ghost. The lantern emitted a dim light in the night. He didn't see the dark and gloomy expression of the woman beside him hidden in her obedient voice. He Xining felt that she had never really known this husband of hers. The Su Zhiheng she saw through the crack in the window just now was crazy, paranoid, anxious, and ruthless. It made her vaguely feel that the Su Zhiheng at that time was the real Su Zhiheng. She couldn't help but have doubts. Then, was this refined, considerate, and seemingly flawless man the real Su Zhiheng? Had her sister, He Yan, ever seen this side of Su Zhiheng? He Yan was so weak, and her body had always been weak. If Su Zhiheng accidentally revealed this side of him in front of He Yan, would her sister be scared out of her wits? But He Yan was already dead. She couldn't ask a dead person. He Xining suddenly felt that this seemingly gentle and beautiful Su family seemed to have many secrets that she didn't know. A terrifying thought surfaced in her mind. Did He Yan really accidentally drown to death? Chapter 205. Shao family's second son had a fiancée. His Majesty had personally bestowed the marriage. His fiancée was a girl dressed as a man. She had fought alongside Xiao Ju on the battlefield and had outstanding military exploits. Now, she was the first female marquis in Dawei, Marquis Wu, and overnight, the streets of Shuo City, restaurants, and tea houses were all talking about the same thing. Some people said that Shao family's second son was indeed extraordinary. His fiancée looked like a powerful woman who was not inferior to a man. Others said that he didn't want to marry the young miss of the Shen family and chose to marry an ordinary girl with no family background. Moreover, she was someone who didn't follow the rules and showed her face in public. No matter what outsiders said, the Shao family was still enveloped in joy. Early in the morning of the next day, Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing brought along the gifts they had prepared overnight. They grabbed Xiao Ju and went to the He family. Without a doubt, it attracted a lot of attention from the neighbors. He Sui complained incessantly in his heart. This Shao family came too quickly. He didn't even have time to ask Qing Mei to go out and buy tea. Qing Mei was also helpless and could only pour a few cups of hot water. The whole family sat uneasily in the house and looked at the people across from them. He Yan had just practiced boxing in the backyard. The Shao family came in a hurry and he didn't have time to change his clothes. Thus, after Xiao Jing and the others sat down, they saw a young girl wearing work clothes. Her hair was tied up in a bun and she walked over while wiping the sweat on her forehead. He Yan thought that Xiao Ju came alone today. When he saw that Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing were also there, he didn't know what to do and looked at Xiao Ju. Without waiting for Xiao Ju to speak, Xiao Jing opened her mouth and said, "Master He, Miss He, it's impolite of us to come here today. Please don't take offense." It's okay, it's okay." He Sui smiled. He didn't sleep at all last night. In the middle of the night, he sat in the courtyard and stared at the sky for several hours. He Yan's marriage came too suddenly, and he felt that it was unreal. Even if it was His Majesty who had granted the marriage, he was still not sure. Everyone in the world said that Xiao Ju was a perfect match, but such a family was never from the same world as them. Last night, he had spent too little time with Xiao Ju. He vaguely felt that this General Feng Yun didn't have the temper of a young master and was much better than Fan Cheng. He Sui had heard a little about Xiao Ju's family. Now, Xiao Ju didn't have any elders, only her brother and sister-in-law. Xiao Jing was a famous gentleman in the capital. He didn't know much about Bai Rongwei. However, he was always afraid that his daughter would be at a disadvantage if she married into another family. Moreover, He Yan had been spoiled by him. If other families didn't spoil her as much as his family did in the future, what would happen? He Sui didn't want He Yan to marry into a rich family. As the saying goes, there was a reason why families of equal social status should be matched. Instead of climbing up the social ladder and being looked down upon, it was better to marry into an ordinary family and hold her in the palm of their hands. He Sui felt bitter in his heart. However, the current attitude of the Shao family's brother and sister-in-law was somewhat beyond He Sui's expectations. Bai Rongwei and Shao Jing weren't vain people. They were very grateful that Shao Ju finally had a sweetheart. They were afraid that they would scare the girl away, so they were very considerate. As for the marriage between the two families, Bai Rongwei also discussed it with He Sui in detail. He Sui saw that the Shao family was so serious, and the Shi too in his heart was relieved. It was always a good thing to be valued. He Yan sat on the side, and there was no place for him to say anything. Fortunately, He Yunsheng went to school early in the morning. Otherwise, if he stayed in the room, he didn't know how he would make things difficult for the Shao family. He Sui was also observing Shao Ju. The first branch of the Shao family seemed to be very reliable. He Sui didn't doubt how outstanding Shao Ju was. However, it was rumored that Shao Ju didn't get close to women and was cold and ruthless. He didn't know what she thought of He Yan. He occasionally asked Shao Ju questions about He Yan, such as what He Yan liked to eat, what she did, and how she performed in the Yangzhou guards. Shao Ju answered one by one. He Yan, she was here as if she was a complete outsider. When this kind meeting finally ended, He Sui even tried to ask them to stay for dinner. There's no need to trouble Master He, Bai Rongwei said with a smile. We have to go back to the residence first and inform the Shao family's relatives about this. The imperial edict arrived in a hurry last night, so we didn't have time to inform them. Today, we should invite all our relatives and friends to have a good time together. Then, you must come another day, He Sui said with a bright smile. He Yan, there wasn't enough rice in their rice jar to cook a meal, and they only had one servant, Qing Mei. If they really wanted to ask them to stay for dinner, they would only be able to serve porridge and side dishes when the guests were hungry. He Yan looked at the jubilant He Sui and was speechless. He Sui sent Bai Rongwei and the others out. When the neighbors outside saw He Sui, they all cheered kindly. Aya, congratulations, old He, you found a good in-law. Old He is so lucky to have raised such a good daughter. Why don't we have this kind of luck? When old He becomes rich in the future, don't forget about us. When He Yan was born, I even held her. He Yan thought that if the real lady He was here and heard these jokes, her face would have turned red with embarrassment. After all, she was like an iron wall, so when she heard these words, she also felt a little uncomfortable. Shao Ju walked behind her. Bai Rongwei and the others seemed to deliberately leave some space for He Yan and her to talk. He Yan asked, Commander-in-Chief, what are you doing tomorrow? Shao Ju looked at her and asked, what? I plan to go to Yuhua Temple on Mount Lian Snow to pray to Buddha tomorrow. He Yan smiled and said, isn't it mid-autumn? I heard that the Buddha in Yuhua Temple is very good. Many people go up the mountain to pray at this time. Yunsheng has to go to school and father has to go to work. I will go alone. If you have nothing to do, you can come with me. There is no harm in praying to Buddha. She always thought about that night when she met Shao Ju. After all, it changed her life. Although it was inevitable that her fate would lead her to a tragic end, before that end, it taught her some courage. This courage continued until now, and it became a fate with Shao Ju. Fate was long and long, like a piece of red silk hanging on an ancient tree. It was thrown away and trampled on, but it would still be picked up by another person. It would be hung again in a place where the wind and rain could not destroy it. How lucky! I have nothing to do tomorrow. Shao Ju curled her lips and said, I can go with you. Okay. He Yan said, then tomorrow morning, I will wait for you at the entrance of Shao Mansion. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard Xiao Ju laugh. He Yan asked curiously, what are you laughing at? Lady, he forgot that he is a woman again. Xiao Ju said slowly, with a teasing look in her eyes. He Yan understood and coughed lightly. Between you and me, there is no need to be constrained by the views of the secular world. Go to sleep. He chuckled, tomorrow morning, I will come to pick you up. He Yan nodded. The He family in the capital was happy and harmonious, full of laughter and laughter. In the other He family, the atmosphere was stagnant, and the mansion was filled with gloominess. He Rufei smashed the cup in his hand against the wall with a pa sound. The porcelain cup hit the corner of the wall, and the peony flower on the cup instantly shattered. The servants and maids in the room didn't dare to breathe loudly, and stood with their heads lowered. It was rumored that General Feihong was straightforward and generous, and didn't care about trifles. This was natural, but occasionally in the house, He Rufei would reveal a ruthless and malicious side. Even the servants of the He family would occasionally be confused. Why did the confident and awe-inspiring general, who was as dazzling as the sun, sometimes become as gloomy as a poisonous snake in the gutter, and the corners of his eyes would be gloomy and gloomy? You can all leave. He Yuanqing stepped through the door, and used his shoe to push aside the fragments in front of him, and called for the servants to leave. After the door was closed, He Yuanqing sat down in front of He Rufei. Right now, it is rumored that during the Battle of Huayuan, you used the thousandly retreat at night technique to subdue the enemy. You are like a different person from before, very different. He Yuanqing took a cup of tea and took a sip. I think that for the next few days, you should say that you are sick and temporarily not go to court. Why go to this extent? He Rufei smiled coldly and said disapprovingly, victory and defeat are common in the military. It's just a military campaign, it's nothing. Is that so? He Yuanqing looked at him, then why have you been restless since you returned to the Fu last night? Is it because of that woman called He Yan? He Rufei suddenly raised his head to look at him. She's not He Yan, He Yuanqing said calmly. I've already sent people to investigate. She's just the daughter of a military officer at the city gates. In the past, she didn't have any connection with our family. I don't know what methods she used to hook up with the Xiao Ju, and even made a marquis. She just appeared in the palace once, and you're scared to this extent? Don't forget, you're General Feihong. The speaker didn't mean it, but in the ears of those who paid attention, it was no different from sarcasm. He Rufei's eyes darkened, and he said, of course I know it's a trick. But at this point, just as someone was wantonly announcing that I'm different from the past, this woman called He Yan appeared. What a coincidence, she's also a woman dressed as a man and got promoted. Father, don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? What do you want to say? We couldn't find anything wrong with that woman called He Yan's identity. Based on her status as a woman, she wouldn't dare to scheme against the He family. Moreover, everyone who knew about the matter was silenced, except for the Su family. Su Zhiheng is as timid as a mouse and wouldn't take the initiative to speak. Father, that woman called He Yan is Xiao Huijin's fiancée, and Xiao Huijin was very protective of this woman last night in the palace. You're saying that this was all planned by Xiao Huijin? He Yuanqing's brows furrowed. The He family and the Xiao family have no past grievances, so why would he do this? If he could, he didn't want to be enemies with Xiao Huijin. Even the powerful Prime Minister Su couldn't do anything to Xiao Huijin, much less that military governor Xiao. If he didn't agree with him, he could chop off the head of the son of a court official. What else wouldn't he do? When He Yan was studying at the Xianchang school, she was classmates with Xiao Ju. He Rufei's gaze was deep, perhaps he already discovered the secret of He Yan's identity. Now that we've already sided with Prime Minister Su, Xiao Huijin doesn't get along with Prime Minister Su, so he naturally wants to deal with our family. We're very secretive when doing things, Father. He Rufei didn't wait for He Yuanqing to finish speaking, and interrupted him. There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. There are spies everywhere in the capital. Since we've already gotten involved in the grievances between the Xiao family and the Su family, we can't just stay out of it. He Yuanqing sighed slightly. He wanted to be careful when doing things. It would be best if he took all the benefits and let others bear all the risks. There were countless benefits to being on the same boat as Su Jingfu, but at the same time, they were being targeted by Xiao Huijin. This really was a terrible thing. We're already Prime Minister Su's people. Xiao Huijin won't let us go. Since that's the case, He Rufei's eyes were filled with murderous intent. We should strike first. He Yuanqing frowned. If you want to deal with Xiao Huijin, you can't act rashly. Who said I want to deal with Xiao Huijin? You mean, didn't they find a woman to act mysterious? He Rufei spoke slowly, his eyes flashing with endless malice. Let's start with that woman. He Yan didn't expect that the appearance of the Xiao family would make He Sui start to have the idea of renovating the residence. He didn't think of changing to another residence. He Yan gave a portion of his previous silver to He Yunsheng, used a portion to bribe the Su family's Fu Wang, and kept some for himself for future use. In addition, although he was a marquis, he didn't have a residence or farmland bestowed by the emperor. He was also fined his salary for a year. Even if he became an official, he would be an official with clean hands. She originally wanted to go to the camp outside the city to see Wang Ba and the others. If the Hong Shan people found out that she was a woman, she could imagine how shocked they would be. But she also felt that she hadn't thought of a suitable reason to go so rashly. It was better to wait a few more days. For now, she would go to Yuhua Temple on Mount Lianxue to pray to Buddha. Early the next morning, He Yan got up and changed into a crab shell green dress with hidden flowers. Although the He family wasn't rich, He Sui was still very willing to buy a dress for Lady He. It was just that in the past year, He Yan had grown a little taller. Although she was still slender, she was no longer as frail as before. She looked a lot more healthy. Qing Mei picked out a bit of her long hair and tied it behind her head, leaving the rest casually draped over her shoulders. He Yan looked at himself in the mirror and was still not used to it. Qing Mei smiled happily. Miss is still so beautiful. When you came back earlier, this servant almost didn't recognize you. He Yan thought in his heart, now I really don't recognize you. He Yan had asked Qing Mei to pawn off all the jewelry from before. Now, he couldn't even find a hairpin. After searching in the drawer for a long time, Qing Mei finally found a wooden hairpin. He Sui probably cut it himself. It wasn't worth much, so he didn't pawn it off at the time. Miss looks good with this. Military Governor Xiao will also like it when he sees it, Qing Mei murmured. He Yunsheng and He Sui had left early, but the two of them were very confident in Xiao Ju. When they found out that He Yan was going to Mount Lianxue with Xiao Ju, they didn't ask any more questions. However, perhaps it wasn't because they were confident in Xiao Ju, but because they were confident in He Yan. After all, ever since they found out that He Yan had chopped off the heads of 2 Yudo at the Liangzhou guards, the father and son looked at He Yan in a different light. All right. He Yan rubbed his head. Just be casual. He Yan grabbed the bundle on the table and smiled. I'm leaving first. She didn't ask Qing Mei to follow her. After all, Qing Mei walked too slowly. He Yan didn't know when Xiao Ju would arrive, so he opened the door first to see if there was anyone outside. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a carriage parked in front of his house. Fei Nu was driving the horse. The curtain of the carriage was half open, and Xiao Ju was sitting in the carriage reading a book. He Yan was startled. He trotted over and asked, when did you arrive? Why didn't you come in? I just arrived. Xiao Ju put down the book in her hands. I thought you weren't awake yet, so I waited. He Yan climbed into the carriage with ease. Qi Wu began to hurry. He Yan sat down and rubbed his hands. Have you eaten breakfast? Xiao Ju glanced at her and didn't say anything. She took out a mahogany box from the small table in the carriage. As soon as she opened it, a fragrant smell immediately assailed her nostrils. It was a piping hot pastry and a cup of sweet syrup. How did you know I haven't eaten? He Yan was greatly moved. They had to go up the mountain in the morning. Qing Mei had to comb his hair and had already woken up early. He Yan didn't have the heart to ask her to cook for him earlier, so he wanted to buy 2 steamed buns before Xiao Ju arrived. He didn't expect Xiao Ju to be so thoughtful. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows. The vegetarian food in the temple is limited. I'm afraid it won't be enough for you. Seeing that he had prepared breakfast, He Yan didn't mind his teasing that he was a rice bucket. He Yan chatted with Xiao Ju while eating. Governor, I heard that the Yuhua temple on Mount Lianxue is very efficacious. Once upon a time, there was a very poor man. He was so poor that his family didn't have enough food to eat. One day, he went up the mountain to chop firewood. Suddenly, there was thunder and rain. He hid in the Yuhua temple to avoid the rain. At that time, the Yuhua temple was just a dilapidated temple. The beggar looked at the Buddha statue and said, Buddha, Buddha, please show me a way to survive. The old people in my family are starving to death. As a result, when he fell asleep in the temple, he had a dream. In the dream, Buddha told him to go home and dig a hole next to the well in the courtyard. He Yan deliberately looked at Xiao Ju's expression. However, this person just looked at him with a faint smile. He was not in a hurry to continue, nor did he urge him to continue. It was as if he was listening to an irrelevant gossip. He Yan almost suspected that he had said something wrong. If Wang Ba was here, he would definitely ask anxiously, what happened after that? What happened after that? However, since the story had started, he naturally had to continue. After this person woke up, he still remembered what happened in the dream. When he went home, he carried a hoe and dug a hole next to the well at night. As he dug out a bag of gold from the ground. After this poor man obtained the gold, he used the gold to do business. Later, it became better and better. He became a local tycoon. After he had money, he went to the Yuhua temple again and gave the Yuhua temple's abbot a generous amount of incense money. He also helped to renovate the temple. The Buddha statue was also given a golden body. After that, the Yuhua temple became more and more efficacious. People said that the more incense money one donated, the more one's wishes would come true. After finishing the story, He Yan drank the last mouthful of sweet syrup. What do you think, Commander-in-Chief? Do you think the legend is very powerful? Xiao Ju did not comment. Lady He's story is not bad. He Yan, this story was indeed made up by her. She had already forgotten from whom she had heard it from. Of course, it was not Yuhua temple, but some other temple. However, it was enough to scare people. In the end, it was directly said by Xiao Ju. He Yan almost doubted whether his ability to scare people had really deteriorated. As if sensing his frustration, Xiao Ju said, the Yuhua temple's abbot is very close to my brother. He Yan, ah. So your story is too fake. He Yan was silent. It was indeed a little awkward to lie in front of someone she knew. However, she looked at Xiao Ju. Okay, this temple is not Yuhua temple. However, the story is true. Commander-in-Chief, do you believe that sometimes things that happen in dreams can be real? Xiao Ju, dreams? Have you ever thought that maybe everything that has happened to us now, whether it was in Liangzhou, Jiang, or the Rundu, is actually just a dream? When you wake up from the dream, you become another person. Everything that you originally had is gone. Her voice was clear and seemed to have other meanings. Xiao Ju could not help but look at her. He thought for a while and said after a while, it doesn't matter if it's a dream. He Yan looked at him. When you wake up from the dream, you can start all over again. He Yan was stunned. He could not help but lower his head and laugh. She was right. When she woke up from the dream, it was fine to start all over again. Just like in her previous life, she met Xiao Ju. Then she died. In her previous life, she became a general, but she also helped others. However, when she woke up from the dream and started all over again, she still met Xiao Ju and became He Yan on the battlefield again. Even if you lost something that was destined to be yours temporarily, it would return in another way. The moon and her sword were the same. It was a sunny day with many pilgrims. At the entrance of Yuhua Temple, a carriage stopped. A young woman helped a middle-aged woman out of the carriage. The middle-aged woman was beautiful, but her face was pale and she looked haggard. The woman beside her looked similar to her. They were mother and daughter. "Mother, walk slowly. Be careful," He Xining said softly. "Madam," he nodded gently. He Xining sighed in her heart. When she left home to marry, Madam He's health was already poor. Now, it was getting worse. This morning, she went to the He family to pick up her mother in the carriage. When she held her mother's arm, she felt that Madam He's arm was so thin that she could hold it easily. It was so thin that it was frightening. "How did father take care of you? Are all the doctors in the residence useless?" He Xining was dissatisfied. "How about I ask my husband to go to the palace and invite an imperial doctor to take a look at you?" "Mother, how can I rest assured when you are like this?" Madam He waved her hand. "I'm fine. Don't bother." He Xining was distressed and helpless. She helped Madam He slowly walk inside. The He family didn't like to go up the mountain to worship Buddha. Today, only the mother and daughter went up the mountain. The guards were waiting outside the temple. He Xining took Madam He to see the temple abbot first and presented the promised incense money. She didn't really want to come to worship Buddha today. She just wanted to find an excuse to see her mother and tell her what she found in the Su family. But now, seeing Madam He's weak appearance, she couldn't say anything. Forget it. She didn't want her mother to worry about these things. As for the doubts about Su Zhiheng, she should let her find out by herself. Anyway, there was still a long way to go. Chapter 206. Yuhua Temple was filled with incense and there were many carriages parked in front of the temple. He Yan and Xiao Ju got off the carriage and Fei Nu drove the carriage to the side to wait for them. The two of them did not bring any maids or servants with them and they were very eye-catching. People who came to worship Buddha could not help but take a few more glances at them. There were those who didn't know the person, so they just looked around. There were those who knew the official's family members. After recognizing Xiao Ju, they guessed He Yan's identity. However, they didn't dare to talk about it in front of him, so they stayed far away. The rules for worshipping Buddha were simple. Ordinary people would donate some incense, oil and rice. Those who were richer would donate some money. Xiao family did not lack money and Fei Nu had already prepared it. After receiving the incense from the monks, they had to enter the temple to worship. Xiao Ju did not enter. He Yan asked him why he did not enter and he only said, "I don't believe in Buddha." He Yan, they were already in front of the temple and he said that he did not believe in Buddha in other people's territory. This person was really arrogant and lawless. However, this kind of thing did not matter if he believed in it or not. She could not force Xiao Ju to worship Buddha. She let Xiao Ju stay outside and entered the temple. He Yan knelt down on the praying mat. The golden Buddha statue she made up for the wealthy merchants looked down on all living beings mercifully. She bowed down and kowtowed sincerely. She said in her heart, she didn't ask for anything else. She only asked for those who were harmed by Hirufei and were burdened by her to be reincarnated earlier. She wanted to be safe and healthy in her next life. After offering incense and lighting the lamp, He Yan walked out of the temple. Xiao Ju was waiting for her in front of the temple. Seeing her come out, he asked casually, "What did you wish for?" "I hope that there will be no more wars in the world." He Yan put her hands together and pretended to be serious. "I hope that the world will be peaceful so that you and I can relax." These words were not false. The matter of Yuto had not been completely resolved. It was said that the imperial court was still debating whether to advocate war or peace. Even now, no conclusion had been reached. After donating incense money and praying to Buddha, one could even have a vegetarian meal in the temple. The vegetarian food of Yuhua Temple was also one of the best. However, He Yan was blind the last time he came here. Even if it was a mountain delicacy, it was tasteless to him. He had already forgotten what it tasted like. Now that he thought about it, he was actually looking forward to it. When they passed the ancient tree, they could see that the huge ancient tree was rooted beside the mountain temple. The branches were as vast as the clouds and mist. They were originally green and glistening, but now they were covered in layers of red. When they got closer, they could see that the red on the branches were strands of red silk. On the red silk, there were words written, which were probably the wishes of the writer. It was said that if one hung one's wish on the ancient tree would manifest its spirit. He Yan remembered that he had hung the red silk here before, and he couldn't help but stop. This ancient tree is very spiritual, he said to Xiaoju. Xiaoju leisurely said, "You want to make up a story again?" "No, it really is very spiritual." He Yan smiled and thought that in her previous life, she had hung a wish on the tree. She hoped that she could see the moon again. At that time, when she wrote these words on the red silk, she felt that it was a pipe dream. Not to mention the moon, just the fact that her eyes could see the light again sounded inconceivable. However, at this impossible moment, even after her death, she was able to be reborn in a hopeless situation and see the moon again. "In the future, when I have more money," He Yan said, "I will buy a lot of fertilizer and water this ancient tree to show my gratitude and sincerity." Xiaoju choked, "Your sincerity is really different." The guest house of Yuhua Temple was a little in front of the courtyard where the monks lived. For those who donated less, many people ate in the same place. For those who donated more, they had their own courtyard. Most of the time, there was only one person in each room. There were fewer people, and the environment was more elegant. Although he was somewhat speechless at the difference in treatment, it was a good thing that there were fewer people. He Yan didn't want to eat a vegetarian meal and be secretly watched by others. Now, because of the marriage bestowed by the Emperor Wen Xian, he and Xiaoju appeared in front of the world. It took a lot of courage for her to do so. Even though she was a famous person in the past, at least she had a mask to cover her face. Now, she didn't even have the slightest bit of cover. In broad daylight, she was like a white peacock shipped by a sea merchant from a foreign country. It was so rare that everyone wanted to see and talk about it. They sat down in the guest house. Not long after, the monk in green brought in many plates of vegetarian dishes. It was indeed very rich. There were steamed white jade Buddha hand, sweet and sour bitter gourd, steamed wild mountain pepper winter gourd, purple potato cakes, celestial tofu. It was much colder on the mountain than it was at the foot of the mountain. After rushing for an entire morning, they were already hungry. Now that the hot vegetarian dishes were in front of them, He Yan couldn't help but have a big appetite. He gave Xiaoju a pair of chopsticks and said, "The money for the sesame oil was not wasted. Governor, if you are not full, can I have another set?" "Xiaoju," he said, "as you wish." He Yan didn't stand on ceremony. She ate boldly. In comparison, Xiaoju ate more elegantly. Not long after they started eating, there was a knock on the door of the guest house. A monk led two people in. For a rich family like theirs, the guest house was small and exquisite. Usually, one family was enough. However, the weather was good today, and it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. There were many pilgrims who came to Yuhua Temple to burn incense. It was probably not enough to accommodate all of them, so they could only squeeze with Xiaoju. Xiaoju frowned slightly. Just as she was about to say something, He Yan said, "It's okay, let them in. I eat very quickly. It's not a problem." It wasn't easy for her to gain some fame in Shuo capital. She hadn't officially fought with He Fei yet. She didn't want to be accused of being overbearing and unreasonable. Xiaoju thought about it and didn't say anything. The two people that the monks brought in were two women. One was older and the other was younger. He Yan only glanced at them briefly. When he saw the older woman's face, his heart skipped a beat. He couldn't control himself and the chopsticks in his hand fell to the ground. He Yan hurriedly bent down to pick them up. At the same time, he hid the shock on his face. This movement attracted the attention of the two people who came in. The two women stopped in their tracks and looked at He Yan. He Yan had just picked up his chopsticks when the monk came over and said, "Benefactor, please wait for a moment. I will go and get a clean set for you." He Yan didn't say anything. The younger woman had already followed He Yan's gaze and saw Xiaoju. She blurted out, "General Feng Yun." He Yan subconsciously looked at Xiaoju. Xiaoju frowned slightly. She seemed unhappy. He Xining was very surprised. He didn't expect to see Xiaoju here. Speaking of which, she had only seen Xiaoju once. It was when she went shopping with a friend. She saw a group of people riding horses through the streets. The people and carriages on the side of the road all avoided them. The man in the lead was handsome and outstanding. At that time, her friend beside her told her, that was Dewey's General Feng Yun. It was probably because this man's appearance was too outstanding and the impression he gave people was too vivid. Therefore, when she saw Xiaoju, it overlapped with her memory. However, everyone knew that this military governor Zhao's temper wasn't very good. For a moment, He Xining supported Madame He and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. He was afraid that if he wasn't careful, he would offend this vicious and merciless military governor. However, Madame He didn't care about this. She only pulled He Xining inside and sat down at the table next to He Yan's. He Xining curiously looked at Xiaoju. There were many rumors about this military governor Xiao. However, there was one rumor that had never changed. It was that he didn't get close to women. However, this rumor was broken a few days ago at the celebration banquet. His Majesty personally bestowed a marriage between him and a woman. Xiaoju protected that woman in front of all the civil and military officials in the main hall. When the news spread to the ears of the people in Shuajing, it shattered the dreams of many young ladies. On the day that Su Zhihan came back from the celebration banquet, his mood wasn't very good. Therefore, he didn't tell He Xining about this matter. Therefore, this matter was only spread to the entire residence the next day when the maidservants in the residence went out to buy goods and heard about it. Speaking of which, Xiaoju's fiancée wasn't a simple woman. She actually dared to dress up as a man and go to the battlefield to kill Yuto. She even became the first female Marquis of Dewey, Marquis Wuan. The most coincidental thing was that this Wu and Marquis had the same name as her deceased sister, Grand Mistress Su, who had passed away due to illness. However, her sister, He Yan, was very weak. She had to spend many years in the countryside residence to recuperate and take medicine every day. Not to mention going to the battlefield to kill Yuto, even walking a few steps would cause her to gasp for breath. Therefore, although their names were the same, their temperaments were completely different. He Xining looked at the woman beside Xiaoju. The woman was young and beautiful, and there was a heroic spirit between her eyebrows. He Xining guessed that the woman who could make Xiaoju, who did not get close to women, be so close to her was not the young mistress of the Xiao family, but his sweetheart, fiancé, Wu and Marquis He Yan. He Xining sized her up. He Yan just lowered her head and pretended to eat seriously. However, there were thousands of thoughts running through her mind. She couldn't help but look at the person facing her several times, Madame He. That was her biological mother. He Yan didn't have a deep impression of Madame He. Compared to He Yuanliang, Madame He didn't like to go out. Usually, unless it was a festival, she would only stay in her courtyard. Perhaps because she was a soft-hearted woman, Madame He was afraid that something would go wrong. He Yan often saw He Yuanliang, but he rarely saw Madame He. However, ever since He Yan found out about his true identity, he often wanted to see what kind of person his biological mother was. He vaguely felt that she was a very quiet and gentle woman. Sometimes, she seemed a little dull. He Yuanliang always had a smile on his face, which was very popular with women. There were also a few concubines living in the second branch. There were also concubines who gave birth to sons and daughters of concubines. In terms of favoritism, He Yuanliang's second wife was definitely not the one that He Yuanliang liked the most. However, He Yuanliang never neglected his second wife. He had never done anything like favoring his concubine and neglecting his wife. At least, before He Yan's previous life, He Yuanliang's second wife, lived a good life in the mansion. One year during a family banquet, He Yan sat at the same table as Madame He when he was eating at home. At that time, she was still young. She was only 10 years old. She sat opposite Madame He. Probably because she was too curious, she looked up at Madame He more often. Later, during family banquets, He Yan and Madame He didn't sit at the same table. She didn't expect to meet her biological mother here without any warning. No matter how much he hated the He family, He Yan's mood wasn't as indifferent as it seemed on the surface when he faced Madame He. He Xining carefully pulled Madame He and whispered, "The one opposite is General Feng Yun and Military Governor Xiao. The one beside him is most likely Marquis Wuan, He Yan, who was betrothed to by His Majesty a few days ago." As soon as these words came out, Madame He stopped picking up her chopsticks and looked up at the opposite table. Now that the news of Xiao Huijin being betrothed to His Majesty was known by the whole Shuo Jing, from the officials and nobles to the common people. Even the beggars on the street knew that his fiancée was called He Yan. It was impossible that Madame He didn't know about it. She couldn't help but be startled when she suddenly heard someone with the same name as her dead daughter. On the other side, Xiao Ju noticed He Yan's sudden silence and asked her, "Why aren't you saying anything?" Before the mother and daughter came, she kept chattering, but after they came, she didn't say anything. So what if she was recognized? He Yan was never someone who acted according to other people's expressions. Afraid that Xiao Ju would see through her, He Yan smiled and randomly found a topic. "Military Governor, is it really okay to keep the black jade you gave me before? What's wrong with it? I just think that it's a bit too precious." He Yan stuffed a potato biscuit into her mouth and stared at the table. She didn't look at the other two people in the room, "But your parents are really good at naming you. Ju, it means double jade. The Empress Dowager gave you a double-colored jade, it's really suitable." Xiao Ju smiled, "Your name is also good." He Yan thought for a moment, her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything and just lowered her head to eat. Madame He stared at He Yan's movements. He Yan was fond of sweet things, so she always ate the beets first. Although she wasn't refined and reserved, she was very frugal and didn't leave a single grain of rice behind. If she encountered a dish that she didn't like, she wouldn't throw it away. She just paused a little, as if to pave some courage for herself, and then she would eat it all in one go and never touch the plate again. As Madame He watched, her face gradually changed. Her originally empty and numb eyes began to become more and more emotional, as if she couldn't help but cry. Xiao Ju's back was facing Madame He, so she didn't see Madame He's strange behavior. He Yan saw it, but he pretended not to know and changed the topic to Xiao Ju. He Xining asked in a low voice, "Mother, why aren't you eating?" The girl seemed to feel something and looked over. Madame He quickly lowered her head and picked up her chopsticks to eat a mouthful of rice. No one saw her tear fall into the bowl. During this meal, except for Xiao Ju and He Xining, Madame He and He Yan ate with different thoughts. He Yan came a little earlier and ate quickly. After the meal, He Yan put down his chopsticks. Xiao Ju had already finished eating. When she finished, she said, "Let's go." He Yan nodded, and the two of them walked out together. Not long after they left, suddenly, someone's voice came from behind. "Miss, please wait." He Yan looked back and saw Madame He running towards him. He Xining was a little surprised, as if she didn't expect her mother to do such a thing. Madame He was not in good health, so after running a few steps, she was gasping for breath. As a madam of an official's family, her behavior was somewhat rude. However, Madam He didn't care about this and walked towards them. Xiao Ju frowned. Who are you? I'm the second madam of the He family in the capital. Madam He glanced at Xiao Ju. The young man's indifferent expression made her a little timid. Even so, she still stared straight at He Yan. She was reluctant to move her eyes away for even half a second. He Yan nodded with a smile. Madam He. I'm sorry. He Xining also caught up and secretly pulled Madam He's sleeve. There was a hint of blame in her eyes. After He Yan left, they still hadn't finished their meal. He Xining wanted to talk to Madam He about the two of them, but Madam He suddenly stood up and chased after him. Everything happened so fast that she didn't have time to stop it. However, He Xining knew that she shouldn't provoke the commander-in-chief of the right army for no reason. Every official in the Shuo capital knew that Xiao Huijin wasn't someone to be trifled with. If she pursued the matter, she didn't want to add more trouble to the He family. Madam, what's the matter? He Yan asked politely. Madam He looked at her, as if she was looking at another person through her. Her voice was soft, as if she was afraid of disturbing the young lady in front of her, or as if she was coaxing her 3-year-old daughter. You are called He Yan? He Yan looked at the woman in front of her. In her memory, Madam He was still very young. Unlike Madam He, who was meticulous and strict, Madam He had a gentle and kind face. At first glance, she could tell that she was a very good person. He Xining had also seen her younger sister break a very expensive vase. Madam He didn't get angry. Instead, she would hold He Xining in her arms and check if her hand was scratched by the broken vase. He Yan was very envious at that time. She felt that her biological mother was really better than her mother. Later, when she returned home after the war, she became He Yan again. Madam He also came to visit several times. However, they had missed each other for too long. Even if they sat in the same room, they felt awkward and alienated. On the day of the wedding, Madam He came to see her off. He Yan sat in the room. When Madam He helped her cover her head, she said something. She took He Yan's hand and said slowly, He, you have to be good in the future. That one sentence made He Yan's eyes wet under the veil. Unfortunately, she couldn't even achieve such a simple wish of being good in the end. Even when she was blind in the Su family, Madam He didn't come to visit her even once because she was sick. The woman in front of her had aged a lot. She was no longer as young as she remembered. He Yan could even see that there were some gray hairs on her temples. She was old. He Xining looked at Xiao Ju. She was nervous and hurriedly explained to He Yan, I'm sorry, Miss He. It's because you have the same name as my sister, so my mother, she didn't know how to continue. If she said that He Yan had the same name as a dead person, who knew if the Marquis would feel that it was unlucky and displeased. Madam He looked at He Yan and asked in a trembling voice, Miss He. Why are you called He Yan? This question really came out of nowhere. He Yan stared at her. After a moment, she smiled carelessly and replied in a relaxed tone, who knows? Normal girls don't have the name, Yan. The river is clear and the sea is Yan. Maybe my parents knew when I was born that I would have to go to the battlefield to protect the safety of the people. If that's the case, this name is quite different from normal people. There was a hint of self-mockery in her words. The river is clear and the sea is peaceful. It naturally sounded like a flourishing age, but she herself was on the battlefield. Not only did her blood-related relatives not feel sorry for her, they even wanted to squeeze every last bit of value out of her. It was unavoidably chilling. He Yan thought that her desire for family affection had been obliterated when she was very young. Since there was no hope, she wouldn't be too sad when she was disappointed. Now that she was in another He family, she received warmth that she didn't have before. When she met Madam He again, the grievances that were deliberately buried deep in her heart were all born. After saying that, He Xining didn't feel anything, but Madam He's expression changed. Her face was drained of blood in a split second and she almost collapsed. He Yan nodded at them. If there's nothing else, we'll leave first. She gently pulled Xiaoju's clothes and walked forward. He Xining waited until the two people walked far enough before she complained in a low voice, "Mother, what's wrong with you? You suddenly rushed out and scared me. It's not like you don't know what kind of person military governor Xiao is." Fortunately, they didn't make a fuss just now. If they were angry, big brother and husband may not be able to do anything. Mother. He Xining suddenly stopped talking, because she saw a big drop of tears in the eyes of the woman in front of her. The tears streaked across the corners of her eyes, like cold dew in the middle of the night, with broken sorrow. He Xining knew that Madam He was thinking of her dead elder sister. After He Yan's death, her mother's health hadn't been good. The doctor always said that she would be fine after some rest, but He Xining also knew that it was a psychological problem. Her mother's heart was always thinking about her elder sister's death, so she became like this. But there was something she didn't understand. She always thought that her mother was always indifferent to her elder sister. Maybe it was because He Yan had always been recuperating in the village and didn't get close to her mother in the Fu, so after a long time, it was difficult for her mother to have the same feelings as her. But after He Yan's death, her mother was so sad that she understood that she wasn't heartless. But if that was the case, why did her mother alienate her so much in the beginning? There was also his father, He Yuanliang, who was very nice to everyone. He was always smiling and had a very amiable appearance. However, regarding He Yan's death, he didn't show that much sadness. In short, He Yan seemed to be a subtle existence in the He family, and He Yan's death made those seemingly normal things finally reveal the strangeness underneath. She was full of questions, but no one could answer her. No one would answer her questions. He Xining held Madam He's hand and didn't say anything in the end. She took a handkerchief to wipe the tears from the corners of her mother's eyes and said in a low voice, "Mother, let's go back." Chapter 207. When they went down the mountain, He Yan was quieter than before. Xiaoju asked, "Are you still thinking about what happened just now?" He Yan was afraid that she would find out, so he casually lied, "I just felt a little sad when I heard what that young lady said." Xiaoju paused for a moment, then said lightly, "Don't worry, you won't become the previous young Mistress Su." He Yan lowered his head and smiled. He didn't know what to feel. Before this, she had already died once. But today, when she saw He Furan again, she found that her mother didn't completely care about her. But if her mother really cared about her, why did He Furan treat her so strangely when she was He Yan? When the He family and the Su family conspired to kill her eyes, when she was accidentally drowned, did He Furan know the truth? He Yan would rather she didn't know. Ignorance is blameless. But even if she didn't know about this matter, Madam He must have known about the matter of her and He Rufei swapping identities back then. What kind of feelings did a mother have when she pushed her own daughter out? She was clearly so close, yet she couldn't call her mother. He Yan narrowed his eyes. Thinking about it, she should be making a trip to the Su family in a few days. She didn't know what clues Fu Wang had found. After the palace banquet, He Rufei and Su Zhiheng would definitely suspect her. She had to hurry. He Xining first sent He Furan back to her residence with the imperial bodyguards and servants before returning to the Su family. Su Zhiheng was in his study. He didn't go to court today. For some reason, ever since he returned from the celebration banquet, Su Zhiheng rarely went out. People outside said that he was sick. He Xining naturally knew that Su Zhiheng was fine. Rather than saying that he was sick, it was more like he had something on his mind. Sometimes, when He Xining talked to him, he could feel that Su Zhiheng was obviously absent-minded. He Xining just pretended not to know. A smart woman should know how to show her stupidity at the right time. This was the rule she learned in the He family's backyard. But no matter how stupid he pretended to be, he had to have a scale in his heart. He couldn't pretend to be stupid, or else he would really be stupid. That night, Su Zhiheng, who was rummaging through He Yan's room before she died, looked very different from usual. He Xining had a layer of suspicion in his heart. When she married into the Su family, she brought along a servant girl with her. Right now, she didn't dare to use anyone from the Su family. She only dared to use the people around her. She wanted to check on some things. If these things had nothing to do with him, He Xining wouldn't care. But all these things showed that He Yan's death was not that simple. Not to mention Su Zhiheng's strangeness, today at Yuhua Temple, his mother met Marquis Wuan, who had the same name and surname, and also lost her self-control. If He Yan had any inside information, who knew if she would become the next He Yan? In the He family, women didn't have any status. Even if she was the daughter born by Madame He, her marriage had been arranged early on. A woman's marriage was to pave the way for a man's career. As for whether the person she married was a human or a ghost, good or bad, it wasn't important. Everything was based on benefits. This was also why when He Yan and Su Zhiheng married, the daughter of the He family was so jealous of He Yan. It was because her marriage seemed to be the best choice that the He family could choose for her. But now, it seemed that there was a hidden story. Xiao Lu, she ordered her personal servant girl, in these few days, secretly ask around in the Fu. When my older sister He Yan was still alive, what kind of discord happened between her and that concubine mother surnamed He, and what kind of mistake concubine mother He committed to be driven out? Eldest young mistress, why are you asking about this? Xiao Lu asked curiously. I have my own ideas, He Xining didn't want to say more. You only need to remember that this matter needs to be kept secret. You must not let outsiders know. Give more money. Also, it's best not to mention my older sister. Start with concubine mother He. This way, even if she wasn't careful and was discovered by the Su family, she could say that she was jealous and wanted to know how that concubine mother in the past received Su Zhiheng's favor. And not expose that she was secretly investigating the cause of He Yan's death. Everyone in the Su family never took the initiative to mention He Yan and avoided He Yan's matters. There had to be a problem. He Xining looked at the bright sunlight outside and suddenly felt that the spacious and bright courtyard of the Su family had become a bit eerie and terrifying. But, even if it was for herself, she couldn't live so muddle-headedly. After praying to the Buddha, He Yan and Xiao Ju didn't directly return to their Fu. Instead, they went to the Liang province guards camp outside the city. The Nan Fu soldiers were more reserved, but Tian Lang didn't allow them to talk too much about their superiors' private matters. Shen Han couldn't control the Liang province guard. He Yan had eaten and lived with a group of soldiers and had already formed a deep friendship. Now that he heard that his brother had become a woman and had even become his superior's fiancée. In any case, other than training the soldiers, the most popular thing that everyone was interested in recently was talking about this matter. When He Yan and Xiao Ju arrived, they were still training the soldiers. He Yan thought about it and then said to Xiao Ju, Governor, why don't you not go in with me? Just stay outside with Shen Jiaodo and the others. If you go in, even if they have questions, they won't dare to ask. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows, okay. Then she went to find Tian Lang. Ever since he returned to the capital, he had been busy with the Su Jingfu's matters. In order to make Su Jingfu lower his guard, he rarely came here. Every time, he would only stay for a short while and then leave in a hurry. After Xiao Ju left, He Yan sat outside the training grounds and waited for them. Not long after, the training ended. The soldiers went to eat in twos and threes with their arms around each other's shoulders. Someone saw He Yan sitting at the edge. He Yan was wearing women's clothing today, so they didn't recognize him immediately. A soldier even approached him warmly and asked with concern, Miss, who are you looking for? He Yan looked at him, stood up, and patted the dust off his body. He smiled, we haven't seen each other for a while. Don't you recognize me? He Yan saw that the new soldier was still staring at him blankly. He seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. He Yan reminded him, I am the #1 Liang province guard. This time, the new soldier became excited. He swallowed his saliva and howled, brothers, He Yan is here. His voice was so loud that He Yan couldn't help but dig his ears. Immediately after, he saw a large group of people, like cats that had smelled something fishy, hula. All of a sudden they all surrounded him, their mouths saying, where is it, show me, show me. He Yan was surrounded by the crowd in an instant. Now that he was dressed as a woman, everyone finally realized that he was indeed a woman. The new soldiers of the Liang province guard didn't try to curry favor with him like they usually did. They even seemed a bit awkward. Some people even blushed and didn't dare to look at He Yan. They looked at their shoes on the ground and asked in a small voice, that brother He. Miss He, how come you're a woman? He Yan cupped his hands in apology to everyone and said in a clear voice, at the time, I really had difficulties and accidentally joined the army. I didn't mean to deceive you all. Now that the truth is out, I thought I should come and apologize to you all. I am indebted to everyone for taking care of me in the past. Even though I am a woman, we are still brothers. These words were spoken in the same tone as before. Only then did everyone's previous restraint dissipate slightly. Another voice came from the crowd, everyone, get out of the way. Where is she? He Yan looked up and saw Wang Ba's group parting the crowd and walking in his direction. When they were in the Liang province guard, they had the best relationship with He Yan. However, even with such a good relationship, they still didn't realize that He Yan's identity was strange. As a result, they were the ones who were most shocked. Wang Ba was the angriest. So he had been calling a girl, boss, for a year and a half. Because of this matter, he had almost become the laughingstock of the Liang province guard these past few days. Everyone wanted to use this matter to make fun of him. He didn't expect that He Yan would come knocking on his door today. He had to come and demand justice. Just as he was thinking, Wang Ba had already walked in front of He Yan. However, just as he was about to speak, he couldn't say a word. Facing a lively and delicate little girl who was looking at him with a sweet smile, even the most heartless man would be embarrassed to scold her. As a result, He Yan saw that the big guy in front of him had a face full of anger and couldn't say a word. However, Xiao Mai squeezed out. He was young and passionate. After being surprised at the beginning, he was happy. Now that he saw He Yan, he was greatly surprised. He Gu, I didn't expect you to be so beautiful. You're too amazing. What He Gu? Hong Shan slapped him on the head. Call her Miss He. He didn't know what to do. After all, they had slept in the same bed before. Brother He, how can you be a girl? Jiang Jiao also found it hard to accept. He had always admired He Yan because He Yan was about the same age as him. However, He Yan could always give him careful guidance on martial arts. He felt that he had benefited greatly from having such a close friend. Now that his close friend had become a girl, Jiang Jiao didn't know what to feel. He originally thought that this must be a misunderstanding and that the information broker had gotten something wrong. Now that he saw He Yan standing gracefully in the crowd, he knew that he couldn't deceive others and himself. She really was a girl. Among them, Huang Xiong and Shi Tu were the calmest. Shi Tu didn't like to show his emotions on his face. Huang Xiong was old and had traveled extensively. There was nothing he hadn't seen before. It was shocking to hear that a girl dressed as a man, but it wasn't new. However, some things that he didn't understand before were now answered. For example, why could He Yan only live in the same room and be so close to Xiao Ju? It turned out that it was inconvenient. Xiao Ju wanted to take care of his fiancée. However, this jade-faced commander-in-chief was indeed as ruthless as outsiders said. She was obviously his sweetheart. When He Yan first arrived in Liangzhou, he didn't neglect any training. She had also lived in a bungalow before. Every morning, she would follow the team obediently and run with weights. If it were another man, he would probably have a tender heart for the fairer sex. Are you really going to marry the commander-in-chief? Xiao Mai asked curiously. Will I have to call you second Madam Xiao in the future? Xiao Mai was a straightforward person. She said whatever she wanted to say, but He Yan's face suddenly turned red. If someone else were to call him second Madam Xiao, he would feel very uncomfortable. His embarrassment was noticed by the recruits of the Liangzhou guards. They all started to jeer, "Aya, brother he is shy. I didn't think that I would be able to see brother he being shy in my lifetime. Heavens, my life wasn't in vain." He Yan, as the group of men talked, they went back to calling him brother he. They probably felt that it was easier to call him that. Hong Shan scolded Xiao Mai, "Be careful. Don't talk nonsense. She's a girl. Do you want people to talk about her like that?" Xiao Mai covered her head and said aggrievedly, "What's there to be shy about?" The men around her laughed. That's right. Brother he didn't even blush when he claimed to be the #1 Liangzhou guard in front of everyone. Aren't you embarrassed? Even the #1 Liangzhou guard was taken by a girl. You guys can't even beat a little girl. What a waste of your tall stature. Is she an ordinary girl? Is she? Is a girl who was invited by military governor Xiao to be his wife an ordinary girl? If you can fight, why don't you do it? I'm not going. You do it. The noise from outside the martial arts field traveled into the small room. Shen Han wiped the sweat from his forehead. Liang Ping, Ma Damiai, and the other instructors stood in the room, not daring to move. Who knew if Xiao Ju suddenly came to settle scores? Speaking of which, every instructor here had treated He Yan harshly before. Especially Liang Ping. However, it was hard to say. For example, when they soaked in the hot spring on Baiyue Mountain, everyone present had a share. However, it seemed that their commander-in-chief was in a good mood. He had no intention of punishing anyone. He just sat in the room and watched the training of the new soldiers. Have you sent the money to them? Shen Han answered, I've already sent it. I've even visited them personally. Some of the new soldiers who died in the Liangzhou Guard were unable to return to Shuo capital with them. They had to go door to door to comfort their families. Don't slack off on your training for the next few days, Xiao Ju said. The instructors nodded. After another hour, it was time for them to leave. Xiao Ju stood up and walked out. Shen Han said, Commander-in-Chief. Xiao Ju turned around and looked at him. Shen Han smiled awkwardly. Congratulations. After seeing the new soldiers, it was almost evening. He Yan and Xiao Ju returned to the city. Xiao Ju first sent He Yan back to the He family before returning to her residence. I'll be very busy these few days. Before Xiao Ju could say anything, He Yan took the initiative to answer. There are still many procedures to be completed for the conferment of Marquis Wu and Commander-in-Chief. You don't have to worry about me these few days. Do you need help? He Yan waved his hand. No need. I'll be fine by myself. After Xiao Ju left, he heaved a sigh of relief. His relaxed days were coming to an end. He Yan tidied himself up. He didn't want He Sui and He Yunxing to see any clues. He pinched his face until he squeezed out a smile. Then, he stepped through the door. On the other hand, Xiao Ju returned to her residence. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei were not around. Bai Guo was watering the flowers in the courtyard. When she saw Xiao Ju, she called out crisply, Second young master. The little girl had specially asked her to serve He Yan so that he could stay in the courtyard. After He Yan left, he was busy with Su Jingfu's matters and forgot about Bai Guo. He didn't expect Bai Guo to still be in the courtyard. It was already late. He would ask Bai Rongwei to arrange for her to stay in another courtyard tomorrow morning. He didn't like other people in the courtyard. Xiao Ju entered the house. Fei Nu went to get the carriage. Not long after they sat in the house, someone knocked on the door. Xiao Ju said, Come in. Wanning walked in from outside. How are the two people in the village? Xiaoju asked. The doctor has already seen them. Their lives are not in danger for the time being. Qi Wu is still being interrogated. The two people have some misgivings and have reservations in their words. Young master, please give them a few more days. When the two people are willing to open their mouths and present evidence, Prime Minister Su will not be able to make a comeback. 3 days. Xiaoju said, at most 3 days. If there is no result in 3 days, I will interrogate them myself. Wanning nodded. After a while, she said, Young master, in addition to this, when I was investigating today, I found out something else. Speak. The military general He family is investigating us. Xiaoju paused. She looked up at him, He Rufei. Wanning nodded, it should be. He Yuansheng and He Yuanliang's connections and methods in the imperial court are not as good as his. His movements are very secretive and careful. Maybe he was a little impatient and exposed himself. Did he find out anything about the rumors that were spreading in the market? No, young master, Wan Ying's expression was very serious. Moreover, if it was only about the rumors, he didn't need to investigate Miss He's background. Xiaoju's eyes suddenly sharpened, He Yan. That's right. Wanning said, he is not only investigating young master, but also Miss He. Xiaoju's face darkened. Because of his relationship with Su Jingfu, if Su Jingfu's people wanted to deal with him, they would target He Yan. After all, He Yan did not have any family background. Even if he had the title of Marquis Wuan, he had not formed his own connections in the imperial court. His foundation was too shallow, and it was easy for him to be uprooted. But if He Rufei wanted to target He Yan, then it would be a big mistake. Young master, there is one more thing. Wan Ying's expression was somewhat hesitant, as if she did not know whether to say it or not. She rarely had this kind of time, so Xiaoju asked, what is it? Wanning thought for a moment, and after a long while, she made up her mind and said, Hanlin scholar Su family is also investigating Miss He. Su family? Xiaoju frowned. If He Rufei was investigating Xiaoju because of his relationship with Su Jingfu, or because he had previously ordered people to spread rumors about him in the market, and thus implicated He Yan, then the Su family was not involved. At this time, they also interfered, which was very thought-provoking. Only investigating He Yan. Only investigating He Yan. Since they were only investigating He Yan, it had nothing to do with the Xiao family. Then the question was, what kind of relationship did He Yan have with the Su family in the past that made the Su family act so rashly? After a long while, Xiaoju said, continue with your work, but after today, investigate the Su family as well. There were some things that were not right that had been overlooked. For example, the second Madam He that they met at Yuhua Temple today, her behavior was also strange. There must be something fishy between the Su family and the He family. Chapter 208. At night, all the servants were asleep, but the hall of the He family was still brightly lit. Madam He stood in the middle of the room. Beside her was her maid, Cui Er, who came up the mountain with her today. He Yuanliang and He Yuansheng sat on both sides. He Rufei sat on a chair beside them. She glanced at Madam He with a heavy gaze. No one knew what she was thinking. Second aunt, what did you say to Xiao Huaijin in Yuhua Temple today? After a long while, He Rufei said, now that Xiao Huaijin has returned to the capital, the situation in the capital has been disrupted again. At this time, every step is very important. Xiao family and our He family are not the same kind of people. I didn't say anything. Madam He said softly. Her eyes were calm, I just took a look at his fiancée. Xiaoju's fiancé was He Yan, the name that no one in the He family was willing to mention. It always reminded them of the bad things in the past. He Rufei smiled, second aunt, what are you doing? My cousin has passed away. Even if they have the same name, you don't think that He Yan is your dead daughter, do you? I told you before, He Yuanliang had already put away his usual smile. His face was very ugly. Don't mention He Yan again. He Yan is dead. It's all in the past. Do you want to kill our whole family? Cui knelt on the ground and trembled. She had been bought over by Madame He. She had to report to Madame He about everything that Madame He did when she was in the house, let alone when she went out. This time, it was the same. She didn't have the chance to eat vegetarian food with Madame He. She only saw Madame He talking with Xiao Ju from afar. When she returned to the house, she couldn't wait to tell Madame He about it. She wanted to be rewarded. But now, Cui regretted that the He family didn't hide these secrets from her. It was not because they trusted her, but because it was useless for a dead person to know the secrets. She had no chance to reveal the secret. She's already dead. Second Madame He looked at him with a trace of anger in her eyes. She can't harm the He family. It's the He family who harmed her. What do you mean? Madame He's face turned cold, and her tone was very dissatisfied. Are you resenting us now? You knew it when I made the decision. Moreover, this is for the sake of the entire He clan. What do you mean by for the whole He family? Second Madame He sneered, when I made the decision, did I have the right to choose? She didn't die for the entire He clan, she died for your greed. You killed my daughter, but you don't feel the slightest bit of remorse. She's already dead. I just want to see my daughter again. Even if they have the same name, even if I know it's impossible, I still want to see my daughter. By the end of his speech, he was already hysterical. Second brother, He Yuanqing frowned slightly. Is this how you discipline your wife? He Yuanliang said angrily, she's a lunatic. I've already said it's a disaster to keep her alive. Kill me, Second Madame He smiled bitterly, and her eyes were filled with despair and madness. If you kill me, you won't be afraid that the secret will be known. If you kill me, I can go down to the ground and reunite with my daughter. I want to see from the sky how long the glory and wealth that you stole from others can last. Even if I become a ghost, I'll curse you from the ground every day. Everything you want will be in vain, and you won't have a good ending. These words sounded particularly strange at night. He Yuanliang said angrily, crazy, all of you are crazy. He Rufei's eyes were cold, and he said lightly, second aunt, don't say that. Even if you go down to the ground, my cousin may not be willing to reunite with you. After all, you were also the one who pushed her to that road. You're not qualified to be her mother. Even if you go down to the ground, she will still resent you. Second Madame He was stunned by his words. In a moment, tears gushed out of her eyes, and she sobbed painfully. Second aunt, don't talk about life and death. Have you forgotten how sad second sister was when you died? Second Madame He's crying stopped abruptly. Xining doesn't know anything. Of course I know second sister doesn't know anything. He Rufei smiled noncommittally. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lived until now and married Su Zhiheng. It's okay if second aunt doesn't want to say. I'll go to the Su family tomorrow and second sister will tell me everything. He Rufei played with the thumb ring on his hand. But second aunt, you have to know that He Yan is already dead, and you have more than one daughter. If you want to kill your other daughter, you can do whatever you want. I won't tell anyone. Second Madame He knelt down with a plop and crawled in front of He Rufei. Don't hurt Xining. She doesn't know anything. He Rufei helped her up and smiled. Xining is so obedient and sensible. Why would I hurt her? Second aunt, you don't have to worry. It's just that second aunt's condition is getting worse and it's not suitable for you to go out. Just announce to the public that you're seriously ill and can't get out of bed. Find a doctor to treat you. He had a pitiful expression. Second aunt, treat your illness well. After a while, all these things will be over and you'll be fine. Men, he ordered the guards outside to come in. Send second madam to the courtyard. She'll recuperate from today onwards. Don't see anyone. Second madam. He was dragged out of the hall. Arguing with Hirufei had exhausted all her strength. No one else in the room said anything. After second madam he left, Yuanqing frowned. Is this really okay? I feel that she'll cause trouble sooner or later if we keep her. Hirufei glanced at Yuanqing with a trace of contempt in his eyes. This man didn't have any talent in his career. He only got his position because of his relationship with Yuanqing. Even so, the cowardice and selfishness in his bones didn't decrease at all. As for his wife and daughter, as long as it involved his interests, he wouldn't hesitate to kill them. However, he wasn't willing to make the final decision. Compared to him, Yuanqing was much more decisive. Second uncle, don't worry. Hirufei smiled faintly. With Xining here, second aunt will know her limits. Moreover, if something happens to second aunt, it'll be more suspicious. At this juncture, it's better for the He family to be careful. If it's not for that, first madam, he asked worriedly. Then what should we do now? If Xiao Huijin really knows something, won't everything we've done be in vain? When He Yan was still alive, Hirufei would still discuss the big and small matters of the He family with Yuanqing and his wife. However, after He Yan died, the He family had already listened to Hirufei's arrangements. In the eyes of the He family, the biggest danger had completely disappeared with He Yan's death. In the future, what awaited the He family was endless glory and wealth. However, because of Xiao Huijin's involvement, the situation had changed. That safety seemed to have many loopholes now, so they couldn't be completely at ease. I'll make a trip to the Su family tomorrow. Hirufei narrowed his eyes. Second aunt has been keeping secrets for so many years. With second sister by her side, even if she finds Xiao Huijin, she won't say too much. Compared to that, I'm more worried about Su Zhiheng. Su Zhiheng? Yuanqing asked. What's wrong with him? This lowly person is trash. He's as timid as a mouse. He can't do much. Hirufei spoke of Su Zhiheng with disdain. This person always talked about how glorious he was, but unfortunately, he would immediately become timid when he encountered a problem. That day at the palace banquet, he only met someone with the same name and was so scared that he almost gave himself away. However, he didn't think about it. How could a dead person come back to life? It was obvious that someone was behind this to make them panic. He could still remain calm, but Su Zhiheng might not. If Su Zhiheng couldn't stand the threat and did something wrong, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, with his temperament, he would definitely reveal all the secrets he knew and implicate the entire He family. If it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid of alerting the enemy, Hirufei would have killed Su Zhiheng more than Madame He. Because to some extent, Su Zhiheng knew no less secrets than Madame He. Even if it was to appease the army, he had to see Su Zhiheng as soon as possible. That's it. Hirufei stood up and rubbed his forehead. There were too many unexpected situations these days. He wasn't completely unaffected. When he walked to the side of the servant girl named Cui Er, he seemed to feel something. He lowered his head and saw that the servant girl was kneeling very low. Her body was trembling, and her white neck was exposed. She looked particularly fragile. What should we do with this girl? Yuanliang asked. Hirufei looked at Cui Er with pity. Then, he walked past her expressionlessly and said, "Kill her." A woman's scream echoed in the room. The next day, He Yan went to the Su family. When he arrived, he coincidentally saw a carriage from the He family stop in front of the Su residence. Hirufei got off the carriage. The servants of the Su residence familiarly welcomed him in. He Yan stood in the corner across the street. Most of his body was hidden in the shadows. He lowered his eyes to hide the ridicule in his eyes. In the eyes of outsiders, Hirufei probably came to see his sister. Only He Yan knew that Hirufei came in a hurry today. He just saw He Xining at Yuhua Temple yesterday. He was afraid that He Rufei came to see her today because he wanted to see her. She also understood one thing in her heart. There were spies from the He family around Madame He. It was very likely that she was no longer free. It seemed that her appearance more or less made He Rufei panic. There was no point in staying here. She turned around and walked to the tea house where she had agreed to meet Fu Wang. At the He family's residence, Su Zhiheng saw He Rufei. As if he saw his savior, he pulled him into the study and closed the door. He couldn't wait to ask, "How was it? Did you find out about that girl named He Yen? What is her background? Why did she come?" He Rufei looked at him contemptuously. "I haven't seen her for a few days. You're so scared that you don't even dare to go out? You don't know. You don't know." Su Zhiheng had a headache. That day when you didn't talk to Marquis Wuan, her demeanor and actions were very similar to He Yen. Moreover, I always felt that her eyes weren't that simple. Even if the dead can't be resurrected in this world, she must know something. She's coming for us. He Rufei sat down on a chair in the room and said neither quickly nor slowly, "Even if she's coming for us, it's not impossible." "What do you mean?" Su Zhiheng asked. "Didn't you doubt whether she's really He Yen?" He Rufei said, "Then kill her again. It doesn't matter if she's real or not. As long as she's dead, it's fine." "How is that possible?" Su Zhiheng was shocked. "She's Xiao Huijin's fiancée now. How would we dare to touch Xiao Huijin's people?" Su Zhiheng didn't have any connections with Su Xiang. For the Su family, it was natural to not have any conflicts with Xiao Ju if they could. They would not have any conflicts with Xiao Ju. He Rufei couldn't tell Su Zhiheng that Xiao Ju had already targeted the He family because of Su Xiang. Otherwise, with Su Zhiheng's cowardice, who was as timid as a mouse, he might tell Xiao Ju and try to get a chance to live. He Rufei said, "My people have already investigated. The He family once had an enemy in Shuajing. Although this matter has already been settled, and now because of Xiao Huijin, no one will take the initiative to mention it. However, one of their sons died, so they might have some resentment in their hearts. I'm guessing that the death of the Fan family's young master is more or less related to He Yen. If someone killed He Yen." He smiled slightly. The Fan family's people seeking revenge is really a natural reason. Su Zhiheng was a little moved, but he still had some concerns. "If you do this, Xiao Huijin might find out." "That's General Feng Yun. I'm also General Fei Hong." He Rufei suddenly shouted. Su Zhiheng was shocked, but he saw that the man in front of him had an extremely gloomy gaze. It seemed that his words just now had touched He Rufei's sore spot. He reacted. "That's not what I meant, forget it." He Rufei waved his hand impatiently. "I'll arrange this matter. You just need to know. During this time, don't do anything stupid and cause trouble for me. I didn't come here just for you today. Where's Xining? Why are you looking for Madam?" Yesterday, she and her mother went up the mountain to worship Buddha. On the way, they met Xiao Huijin and He Yen. "I don't know what they talked about," He Rufei said. As soon as he said this, Su Zhiheng immediately became nervous. "I'll find her immediately." He Xining was drying books in the courtyard. When she heard that He Rufei had come and took the initiative to call her over, her first thought was not happiness, but nervousness. Xiao Lu asked her, "Madam, why do you look so pale?" He Xining took out a mirror and saw that her lips were pale. She asked Xiao Lu to bring some lipstick to her lips and took a deep breath. Then, she put on a smile and walked towards Su Zhiheng's study. When she reached the study, He Xining called out, "Husband, big brother." Su Zhiheng hurriedly asked her to sit down. "Big brother passed by your residence today, so he came to see you." Su Zhiheng smiled. "Big brother is very concerned about you." He Xining obediently thanked him. "I heard that you and second aunt went to Yuhua Temple to worship Buddha yesterday." He Rufei looked at He Xining and smiled. "Second aunt's health has not been good recently. It's good to worship Buddha. He Xining nodded. Yes, I saw that mother's complexion was not good. I was also very worried. Father has already invited a famous doctor to the residence to nurse second aunt's body. You're just too worried. He Rufei comforted. Then, he changed the topic and asked casually, I heard that the two of you also met General Feng Yun and his fiancée at the temple yesterday. He Xining's heart tightened, but she did not show it on her face. She revealed a surprised expression. I didn't expect Big Brother to also hear about it. When Mother and I saw the two of them, we were quite surprised. We didn't expect that such a cold and indifferent person like General Feng Yun would actually believe in Buddha. Believing in Buddha has nothing to do with this. He Rufei picked up the teacup and took a sip. He smiled and said, What did you talk about? He did not ask, Did you talk, but, What did you talk about? It seemed that their every move in the temple had been known. He Xining was even more nervous. She did not know what happened to her mother when she returned to the He family last night. Looking at He Rufei's appearance, he seemed to know everything. But He Xining was not completely stupid. She sighed and looked a little sad. Big Brother also knows that after Big Sister died, although Mother did not say it on the surface, she was very sad in her heart. I heard that military governor Zhao's fiancée had the same name as Big Sister, so I wanted to go and see her. Mother only asked, You are He Yan. I was afraid that I would offend military governor Zhao, so I did not wait for her to continue. I apologized to military governor Zhao and Miss He and pulled her away. He Rufei also sighed when he heard this. But the look in her eyes still made He Xining's back feel cold. He stared at He Xining and suddenly asked, Then, is that Marquis Wuan really that similar to your big sister? Su Zhiheng looked at He Xining. He Xining's palms gradually exuded beads of sweat. She was stunned for a moment, then she suddenly laughed and said, Big Brother, why are you also like this? It's broad daylight, can you not say such scary things? Even though I don't have much contact with Big Sister, but from what I see, that Marquis Wuan and Big Sister are not the least bit similar. Big Sister is well-behaved and polite, but Marquis Wuan has a lively temperament. When she was talking to military governor Zhao, she was not the least bit afraid. If it were Big Sister, she would definitely not be like this. He Rufei stared at her, as if trying to discern whether she was telling the truth or not. Just when He Xining felt that her smile was somewhat stiff, He Rufei looked away and said, That's true. He Xining breathed a sigh of relief when the oppressive pressure was suddenly lifted. I still have other things to do. Since I've seen you, I should go. He Rufei stood up. As if thinking of something, he turned back to look at He Xining and said, It's not peaceful outside these few days. It's best if you stay in the Fu and don't go out. He Xining hurriedly said, I know. He Rufei went out. Su Zhiheng said, I'll see Big Brother out. Then he followed him out of the study. He Xining sat alone in the room. After a long time, she slowly reached out and touched her heart. For a moment, she felt that her heart was about to stop. Even though Su Zhiheng said that He Rufei was just passing by, He Xining knew very well that he came for her, for yesterday's matter. However, compared to Xiao Huijin, He Rufei's focus seemed to be more on He Yan. Why? She did not dare to continue thinking about it, but she could not help but guess. He Rufei's last words seemed to be a reminder of concern, but He Xining's intuition told her that it would not be easy for her to leave the Fu in the future. Would she have to stay in this Fu, cut off from the rest of the world? He Xining could not help but shiver. If she was already like this, then her mother's situation would be even worse. What should she do? On the other side, when He Yan finished his second cup of tea, Fu Wang arrived. As soon as he came in, he went straight to He Yan's room and said, Young master, I've been waiting for you for so long. Fu Wang had learned to be smart. He could not come here every day, or else he would be suspected by the Su family. However, if he did not come, he was afraid that he would miss He Yan. Therefore, he took some money and asked the teahouse's waiter to keep an eye on him. If He Yen came, the waiter would go to the Su family's door to inform Fu Wang. Therefore, Fu Wang could come here as quickly as possible. Originally, when I knew you were here, I wanted to come. However, there was an important guest in the Fu today, so I did not dare to leave my post without permission. I could only wait for the important guest to leave before secretly coming here. He Yen knew that he was talking about Hirufei, so he did not pursue the matter. He only smiled and asked, since little brother is so anxious to see me, it seems that Mother Qin's matter has been settled. Fu Wang cursed in his heart. This young master was really impolite. He did not even exchange pleasantries when he came up. Instead, he talked about business like this. It was really too unreasonable. However, even though he thought this in his heart, he did not dare to say it out loud. Fu Wang smiled and said, there is good news and bad news. Which one does young master want to hear? The good news. The good news is that Mother Qin is really not dead. These days, this little one has been diligently searching for her whereabouts for young master. As expected, there is a clue. Although it is not certain that we can find her, it is certain that Mother Qin is still alive. There is an 80 to 90% chance that she is at her lover's house outside the city. However, that lover is very cunning and often cannot find her. Every 3 to 5 days, she will change places. If young master trusts this little one, give this little one another 8 to 9 days. This little one will definitely be able to find Mother Qin's whereabouts. 8 to 9 days. He Yen slowly opened his mouth, that's a bit long. That's not it. Fu Wang had a long face. This little one also has to make arrangements and run all over the place. This matter is very important. Young master trusts this little one, but this little one does not trust others. This little one is afraid that this little one will accidentally mess things up. Naturally, this little one cannot be careless and do things half-heartedly. He Yen smiled and took out an ingot of silver from his bosom. He placed it on the table. Fu Wang immediately beamed with joy. He put the ingot of silver into his bosom and said seriously, as long as young master needs it, this little one will do everything for young master as soon as possible, even if this little one has to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire. He Yen did not feel like listening to his glib tongue. He only asked, what is the bad news? Fu Wang stared blankly for a moment, then looked around as if he was afraid that someone would overhear. Only then did he lean over and whisper, the bad news is, there are still people in the Su estate looking for Mother Qin's whereabouts? He Yan's fingers moved slightly. He said, Su Zhiheng. Fu Wang's eyes widened. How did you know? He anxiously said, that's right, it is Master Su. This little one has been asking around these past few days and discovered that Master Su had also sent people to look for Mother Qin's whereabouts. However, it was because of this that this little one was able to borrow their strength and smoothly investigate without being discovered. Young master, if you really want to find Mother Qin, you must first meet her before Master Su finds her. Chapter 209. After leaving the Su estate, He Yen went straight back to the He estate. He Sui and He Yunsheng hadn't returned yet. He Yen took out a small box from under the table. There were a few silver ingots inside. Fu Wang was greedy for money. If there wasn't a huge benefit, he wouldn't dare to take such a big risk for her. He Yan's gaze gradually became serious. Su Zhiheng was probably scared out of his wits. That's why he went to find Mother Qin so quickly. She had to find her before Su Zhiheng, so she had to bribe him. Looking at the pitiful silver ingots, He Yen sighed. Did he really have to make another trip to Lutong village? A luxurious carriage stopped at the entrance of Shi Jinbo's estate. Servant girls escorted a young miss in. The Chu estate servants hurriedly came out to greet her. Miss Su is here. Su Pingting held her chin high, lifted her dress, and stepped into the Chu clan's gate. When Su Jingfu occasionally came to the Chu estate to find Chu Xilan, Su Pingting would also come along. Everyone in the Chu estate knew that Su Pingting was the apple of Su Jingfu's eye. They didn't dare to slight her. Madame Chu followed them out. When she saw Su Pingting, she smiled and said, "Miss Su is here. Xilan hasn't returned yet. Please sit in the main hall and drink some hot tea. You can wait for Xilan to come back." Su Pingting glanced at Madame Chu and snorted as a response. Her actions were very rude, but Madame Chu didn't get angry. She still had a smile on her face as she went out to instruct the servant girls to make some snacks. Su Pingting looked at her busy figure and smiled in satisfaction. Shi Jinbo's wife was born with an unattractive appearance. This wasn't a big deal. In the Shuo capital, there were many women without good looks. However, she had married a handsome man like Chu Linfeng. When the two were compared, it naturally became a joke. Chu Linfeng was also a man who lusted after beauties. He brought concubines into the manor one by one. He brought a total of 19 concubines into the manor, all of whom were outstanding beauties. In this way, Madame Chu looked even more pitiful. However, no one dared to look down on Madame Chu. In this manner, other than Chu Zhao, no concubine could give birth to Chu Linfeng's child. Su Pingting had also heard from Su Jingfu that Chu Zhao's position in the household was awkward. Since she was in love with Chu Zhao, she had to stand on the same side as Chu Zhao against a common enemy. Therefore, every time she came to the Chu residence, she had to make things difficult for Madame Chu, the official mother, so that she could avenge Chu Zhao. It was the same today. Madame Chu had a maid bring in snacks and tea. Chu Linfeng wasn't in the manor at this time. Madame Chu smiled and said, "I haven't seen Miss Su in a while. Ever since His Majesty granted the marriage, I've been very happy to hear that Miss Su is going to marry our Xilan." In the Shuo capital, only Miss Su is worthy of Xilan's attention. Who didn't like to hear compliments, especially compliments about Chu Xilan's love for her? Su Pingting was a little proud when she heard that. She said, "Of course. No other woman is worthy of brother Xilan." Madame Chu smiled and took a sip of tea. Her gaze landed on the maid behind Su Pingting, Mo Tai. Su Pingting noticed her gaze and said unhappily, "Why are you looking at my maid?" "I'm looking at how pretty Miss Su's personal maid is." Madame Chu gently stroked her hair and said unhurriedly, "After you and Xilan get married, Ying Xiang, who is by Xilan's side, is also not bad. When you walk out, you will be a family of beauties." It would have been better if she hadn't mentioned this. As soon as she mentioned Ying Xiang's beautiful face immediately appeared in Su Pingting's eyes. Mo Tai's looks were not bad, but compared to Ying Xiang, it was far worse. Not to mention Mo Tai, there were countless girls in the Shuo capital, but there were only a few who could compare to Ying Xiang. Speaking of which, Su Pingting suddenly realized that she had been seeing Chu Zhao these days, but she hadn't seen Ying Xiang. "Where is that girl now?" Su Pingting asked. "Xilan said that she doesn't need to serve him. She can just do some light work in the courtyard." Madame Chu smiled and said, "Miss Su, you know that Xilan has a gentle personality and is kind at heart. He's always very kind to girls. Ying Xiang is his maid who grew up with him. She's more special than the other servants." Mo Tai couldn't help but say, "No matter how special she is, she's still just a servant." Su Pingting clenched her fists and her nails dug into her palms. Her expression was ugly. Ying Xiang was a thorn in her heart. With such a vixen by Chu Zhao's side, how could she be at ease? If it weren't for Chu Zhao's protection, Ying Xiang would have died 1,000 times over. When she was young, she once joked that she wanted to sell Ying Xiang. Chu Xilan, who had always been obedient to Su Pingting, ignored her for half a month for the first time. At that time, Su Pingting understood that Chu Zhao wanted to protect Ying Xiang. If she used the same method to deal with Ying Xiang that year when she was interested in Chu Zhao would never forgive her. Su Pingting didn't want Chu Zhao and her to be estranged. She also didn't want Chu Xiao to think that she was a vicious woman. He had endured this for many years. However, she did not have an engagement with Chu Xiao. Could it be that in the future, when she became Chu Xiao's wife, she would have to tolerate a vixen hanging around under her nose every day? Madame Chu took in Su Pingting's expression and sighed. Miss Su is still young and hasn't been the head of the household. However, once you get married, your life will be completely different from when you were a young lady. You see, there are a total of 19 concubines in the Chu estate. All of them treat me with respect. It doesn't seem bad. Do you really think I don't have any grudges? A woman can be jealous and throw a tantrum before she gets married. But if she's still like this after she gets married, others will say that she's jealous and impolite. Su Pingting was furious. Who dares to say that I'm jealous? Even if they don't say it, they still think so. Madame Chu said with a smile, therefore, if Miss Su has someone she doesn't like, you must send that person away before you get married. Otherwise, it'll be a small matter if they stay in the estate and affect your relationship as a married couple. You're still young. It won't be good if you hurt your relationship. Madame Chu's words were full of concern and her face was full of smiles. Su Pingting knew that Madame Chu was trying to drive a wedge between them. However, what Madame Chu said was what she cared about the most. Keeping Ying Xiang was like leaving a thorn in her heart. If she didn't remove this thorn, she wouldn't be happy for the rest of her life. What if the person I want to get rid of is protected by someone else? Su Pingting asked. Chu Linfeng found 19 beautiful concubines. Among them, no matter how smart or stupid they were, none of them could compete with this average-looking woman in front of her. To be honest, Su Pingting quite admired Madame Chu. If she didn't have some tricks up her sleeve, how could she control the Chu estate? That's easy. Madame Chu said. I heard that the Prime Minister was the Crown Prince's teacher. The Crown Prince lacks smart and considerate people. If Your Highness the Crown Prince asks for it, who would dare to refuse? Su Pingting's eyes lit up. She had forgotten that she couldn't do anything to Ying Xiang, but the Crown Prince could. How could Chu Xiao refuse the Crown Prince? For a moment, Su Pingting was overwhelmed with emotions. Even Chu Xiao didn't want to wait. He stood up, glanced at Madame Chu, and smiled for the first time today. Thank you, Madame Chu. I still have something to do today. I'll come another day. He hurriedly left with his maid. After Su Pingting left, the smile on Madame Chu's face faded. The servant next to her whispered, Madam, if the Crown Prince really wants Ying Xiang, there's nothing the fourth young master can do. Chu Xilan has always been wise to protect himself. No matter how much he loves that girl, he won't destroy his future for a lowly servant. I never thought that he would go against the Crown Prince. Then you, Madame Chu picked up the teacup in front of her and took a sip. After a while, she said, it was Su Pingting's idea for Ying Xiang to be taken away by the Crown Prince. I will naturally let Chu Xilan know about this. That lowly bastard is very vengeful. He doesn't show it on his face, but he's probably very angry inside. I want him to fight with the Su family. You also know, Madame Chu sneered. If he fights with the Su family, the only result is death. I'll wait for the day he dies. He Yan didn't know anything about what happened in the Chu family. She hadn't seen Chu Xiao since the celebration banquet. She thought that he was probably busy with his marriage with Su Pingting. After all, the Su family valued this daughter very much. That day, He Yan went to pick up He Yunsheng from school in the evening. It was early winter in the capital, so the sky got dark early. There weren't as many people on the streets as usual. Other than the hawkers who sold hot soup, people still preferred to stay in warm houses. A group of young men walked out of Helu Academy. He Yunsheng was surrounded in the middle. The situation was completely different from the last time He Yan came. Yunsheng, in the future, your brother-in-law will be the famous General Feng Yun. You're still the best. How can this be called Yunsheng's best? This is called Yunsheng's sister's best. Can your sister do this? She can't do it. He Yan listened by the wall and felt that something was wrong. Why did it sound like they were scolding her? Now in the academy, He Yunsheng had changed from being ignored by everyone to someone who wanted to get close to him. It was just that he had a sister who was a marquis and a brother-in-law who was a general of the clouds. There were even shameless people who wanted to go to his house as a guest. Bah! He didn't even know that person. It wasn't easy to get rid of this group of sticky candy. He Yunsheng carried a cloth bag and walked home. Someone patted him on the back. When he turned around, He Yan reached out and rubbed his head. Why are you walking so fast? Are you in a competition? He Yunsheng was stunned and looked around. Why are you here? I dealt with some business today, He Yan said seriously. I passed by your academy on the way home. I was waiting for you to go back together. Don't come to the academy to find me in the future. He Yunsheng walked forward in a bad mood. I don't know what these lunatics will do when they see you. He Yan smiled and guessed what happened to this young man. He said, I know. Our Yunsheng doesn't like to be in the limelight. I won't come to find you next time. Sigh, I think Dad will be home soon. Qing Mei will cook porridge tonight. Let's buy a few mutton buns to eat. You only know how to eat. He Yunsheng complained, but he obediently followed He Yan to buy some buns. The mutton buns on the streets of Shuajing had thin skin and large fillings. They were not expensive. The hot buns were packed in oil paper bags and held in their arms. They were warm. He Yan carried the paper bags and walked home with He Yunsheng. He turned into an alley and took out a bun for He Yunsheng. Are you hungry? Do you want to eat one to fill your stomach first? He Yunsheng refused. No, do you want to grow up to be Tang Yuan from the Wang family next door? Tang Yuan was a pig raised by the Wang family next door. It was also the fattest pig on the street. When it walked, it could only see a round and white ball. Therefore, even though it was a huge monster, it had a cute name, Tang Yuan. He Yan looked him up and down and took a bite himself. You're so young, but you already know how to care about your appearance. I told you, you're at the age where you're growing. If you don't eat more, how can you grow taller? It's fine if you lose weight after you gain weight. Anyway, you won't look bad in the future. He didn't know what kind of nonsense she was talking about, but He Yun was angry. He was about to teach her not to speak so casually in the future, but he saw He Yan suddenly frown and quickly pull him behind her. He didn't have time to ask what happened, but the half bun in He Yan's hand was already thrown out, accurately hitting a shadow on the wall. The next moment, on all four sides of the wall, several shadows appeared out of nowhere, holding knives in their hands as they rushed towards the siblings. Yunsheng, be careful. He Yan pushed He Yunsheng to the corner of the alley. He Yunsheng was stunned by the sudden assassination. When he turned over and sat up, he saw He Yan fighting with the group of men in black. Their target was not him. He Yunsheng shouted, "Help! Someone's killing someone." However, this street was already sparsely populated. Now that it was night time, there were even fewer people. Even if there were people, those who were timid did not dare to come this way. He did not bring any weapons to school. Even if he wanted to rush in to help bare-handed, he was only halfway there when he was slashed by a man in black and fell to the ground. Yunsheng. He Yan was anxious. He bent his body to avoid the blade of the man in front of him. He bent his elbow and directly hit the man's abdomen. The man was knocked back. He Yan seized the opportunity to snatch his knife and turned to the side to knock down the other people's knives. He Yan's knife skills were not bad. Although there were many people, their skills were not good. In just a moment, they fell under his knife. He Yan did not take their lives. He kicked the last person down. He Yunsheng hurriedly ran over. His eyes were full of panic. He Yan. Impudent. He Yan wanted to make him feel more relaxed. He deliberately joked, I said to call her sister. He Yunsheng did not care. He only grabbed He Yan's hand and looked up and down, are you hurt? What happened to you just now? Why did you push me out? Your small body is not enough to block the knife. He Yan said, go and get the torch on the wall. I want to ask a few questions. He Yunsheng was still a little nervous. He Yan urged him a few times before he went to the wall to get the torch. He Yan took the torch and walked to the nearest person. He squatted down in front of him. At first glance, he was stunned. She did not attack the vital parts of these people. But this person's mouth was bleeding and he was motionless. At first glance, he was dead. She took the torch and looked at the remaining people. They were all the same. What happened? He Yunsheng was very sensitive to killing people because of the Fan Qing incident. At this moment, he saw that the people lying on the ground were not breathing. He could not help but panic, why are these bandits all dead? You clearly. They put poison in their mouths. When they were caught, they bit the poison and killed themselves. He Yan stood up. Under the light of the torch, his eyes were very bright, they are not bandits. They are men of sacrifice. Men of sacrifice? He Yunsheng was stunned, men of sacrifice, why would they come to kill us? No, to kill you. Just now, when He Yan pushed him out, those people did not take the opportunity to take his life. Instead, they kept pestering He Yan. But He Yan had been in Liangzhou all this time. He just returned to Shuajing not long ago. He did not have any enemies. Why would someone deliberately want to take his life? At this time, the sound of people and horse hooves came from outside. Accompanied by the light of the fire, a large group of people ran over with torches. He Yan looked up and saw that it was the city guards. Thinking about it, He Yunsheng's loud shout just now had alarmed the surrounding people. Some of the smarter ones went to look for the nearby city guards. What happened? The leading soldier dismounted from his horse. When he saw the corpses on the ground, his expression immediately became serious. He Yunsheng was afraid that they would suspect He Yan and himself. He hurriedly said, Officer, when we just arrived here, these people jumped out and wanted to kill us. My sister fought with them. When these people saw that they could not beat my sister, they took medicine and killed themselves. The young man was still a bit nervous. But compared to the last time on the boat, he was much better. At least he could finish a sentence. Sister. The soldier looked at He Yan suspiciously. A woman against so many men. The men were not her match. It sounded a bit unbelievable. He Yan did not panic. He only took out the official seal from his chest, Marquis Wu and He Yan. Hearing this, the soldier jumped in fright. He believed He Yunsheng's words by 70%. Who did not know about Marquis Wuan? That beautiful woman who was conferred the title of Marquis. She was also the sweetheart of the Right Army commander. So it's Marquis Wuan. After confirming that the official seal was real, the soldier's attitude became much more respectful. Looking at the corpses on the ground, he still had some doubts. You're saying that these people ambushed you and wanted to take your life? He Yan nodded his head. Does Marquis Wuan know who these people are? He Yan shook his head, since they are death soldiers, they are people who want to take my life. However, I don't have any enemies in Shua City, so I have some doubts in my heart. Report it to the officials. She said. He Yunsheng raised his head. This matter is not something that I can solve alone. There are actually people who dare to attack an official of the imperial court. If the one ambushed today was not me, but a weak civilian, what would happen? Maybe the Shua City's city defense is not enough, which is why they are so careless. The woman was usually very polite. However, when she kept her smile, she seemed a bit cold. In my opinion, let's leave this matter to the officials. What do you think, sir? The soldier wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and smiled. Of course, of course. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.